and vice chairman are both ill. And so Ed Whiting will be taking over as chair tonight. He's the secretary, and he's the last of the elected people on the board. So it goes to him tonight. Now, if you've got a copy of the agenda, you realize this is a very long one tonight. So we would ask that those of you who are going to want to talk on whatever issue would try to make it as short as possible. Some of us would like to get home before midnight tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ed Whiting, who will be in charge here now.
I'll call the May 21st, 2015 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. And as per usual, our first item is a citizen forum where we invite anybody that has an issue they wish to talk about that's not included on the agenda to please come forward and say your words.
Good evening. I'm John Holstrager, 345 Barney Circle here in Farragut. I have a procedural question for the Planning Commission. I'd like to make a proposal for you to consider and vote on tonight. That proposal is as follows. Homeowners in Farragut would ask that the MPC adopt a resolution to vote on the rezoning of the Smith Road parcel being considered by Continental not later than 6/18. So in other words, what we're asking is that there would be no further delays by Continental, regardless of, who can make it and who can't. Many of us have put in a lot of hours. Many of you have put in a lot of hours on this one. And we'd like to see an up or down vote on the 18th. If they can't make it, tough. We've been ready. They've had plenty of time to get ready. They have a staff of people who are full-time who could have been ready should they choose to. They chose to go to a convention instead. It was over with yesterday. They could have actually been here. So it's a little disingenuous to put in the paper that somehow they couldn't be here tonight. So procedurally, how might I go about that, or can you recommend a way to do that?
Yes, we'll address that issue in due course.
Okay. Thank you for considering that.
If there are no further remarks from the audience, next item is approval of the agenda.
I have a question. The approval of the agenda on item 7. Is that item on the agenda?
Oh, we'll get to it. The approval of the...
I know we're going to discuss that, but if we approve the agenda, what are we approving on item 7?
Okay,
Voting on it or not tonight?
Item 7
Yes.
is postponed. Items...
Well, it says it's been requested to be postponed.
10 and 18 are also postponed.
I don't have a problem with those. Those are postponed. But item 7, the request has been made.
That's okay. On this item,
Which one is being recognized?
Well, the only reason that, let me just clarify something. We started adding the approval of agenda to our agenda for this very reason, in case something came up after the agenda was advertised. It was a change from what was advertised, that we could act on that agenda at the meeting. When an applicant requests for postponement on an action, that is something that we have always given consideration to and accepted. And this one on item number 7 was a late request, but nevertheless it was a request for postponement. The other 2 items that Ed pointed out were we knew about ahead of time and was able to get those on the agenda that was advertised. That's why they were noted when the advertisement came out. So there's, as Ed mentioned, there's 3 items that have been requested for postponement, numbers 7, 10, and 18.
yes, and since this item 7 the issue was just discussed, I would, rather, in improving this, I would add that on this item, if in fact a postponement is requested past the next meeting, that the item be deleted from the agenda and the proposer be required to resubmit it.
I agree with the gentleman who just spoke. These citizens of this town have really been jerked around over this. And this behavior is one of the things, one of the reasons the town of Farragut is here today, because 35 and 40 years ago, we were treated this way.
Okay, in that vein, I propose that the items be postponed as requested till the next meeting, the three items, 7, 10, and 18. But item 7 should request, be further request for proposal deferment, that in fact it be removed from the current agenda and a resubmittal required.
Ed, I'm not sure I follow you. Can you say more about what that means?
That means that basically that if they don't show up next time, the item dies and they have to start again.
Okay, that's a little different than my request. My request was that we do an up or down vote on the 18th so that we can kind of get on with our lives.
Well, it's just, that's about amounts to the same thing.
No.
Well, if in fact it, well, yeah, it does. If they don't, if they come, no, as proposed, if it's on the agenda next time, it's either going to get voted on. If it doesn't get voted on, then it's removed from the plan and it's dead for time, unless they should resubmit it.
So you're saying if they would have to resubmit,
Let's start again in the process.
start the process over, and I'm not sure I know what that means. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, there's a relatively extensive process to get on the agenda on the Planning Commission. And basically, we're saying that if they do not show up next month, then we'll consider the plan will be their proposal is no longer applicable without resubmittal.
If I may speak, please. My name is Mull, M-U-L, Wyman, W-Y-M-A-N, 528 Wyndham Hall Lane here in Farragut. We're right now on the third down of this rezoning request. It's gone to Staff Developer Committee. You all have had a workshop on it, and it was supposed to be heard tonight. As Mr. Holzrader said, the owner and the developer, I think the owner may be here, but they were saying that, you know, since they were out at this international shopping center, that they really needed to have this postponed. It should be heard at the June 18th meeting of the Planning Commission, one way or the other. Not resubmit, but it should be heard. Why do we have to go through at least 3 more rounds of this when we've already gone through 3? If you go to UT football game, you know it's third down for what? That's where we are. So I'm asking the members of the Planning Commission, June 18th, please vote on this item. We don't want to resubmit and start the process all over again. That's going to push it back after Labor Day. And so that means it'll be 8 months from the time it first started in January until it could be heard for a recommendation by the Planning Commission, and then goes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, because they're the ones that have to say yes or no. Thank you.
Ed, I might offer that this might be something we may want to contact Tom Hale, the town attorney, and get some guidance on procedurally, make sure we're handling this correctly.
Yeah, this is a little bit uncharted territory for us, but certainly an applicant always has the right to request a postponement. But when it becomes recurrent, then it, does create a problem for public notice and public participation. So, I think that I can certainly have a discussion with the town attorney, but I think if the Planning Commission feels that they absolutely, the applicant needs to get an up or down vote on June 18th, and I think that is something that could be made clear to the applicant.
Does this board have the right to ask for it to be on the September agenda, not the June agenda? In September, the kids will be back in school, people will be through with vacations, and everybody can know it's going to be happen on September 17th.
No, that
Let's
wouldn't
try.
be something that.
Another procedural question, if I may. Could residents of Farragut, homeowners, ask for it be granted a delay, just like Continental has asked for it and received?
No, I mean, the applicant's the one that submitted the action, the request, and they would basically control the process. But I think it's perfectly reasonable for the people that are deciding this matter to basically, draw a line in the sand and say we've got to act on it one way or the other, because otherwise this thing. Well, one thing, their schedule gets messed up the further they drag it out. So to me, it doesn't make sense that they would want to do that either. I would think they would want to have an up or down vote one way or the other. Planning Commission just makes a recommendation on a rezoning anyway. It's got to go on to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. They make the final decision. All we're doing is making a recommendation.
Well, I certainly support what Mark has said, and we would like to see this settled. I think there's some people in the room here tonight that want to see this up or down vote as soon as we can. June 18th is okay with us. We'd like your recommendation of a no vote for the rezoning.
Well, I really think that we've basically in the past agreed to these postponements, and now we're saying you get on this kind is far enough that if you don't show up and you request another proposal or another postponement, that you will not get a postponement, which then causes the item to be withdrawn from the Planning Commission agenda. And so that's basically, it stops there. Well, they can always, even if you vote it down, they can resubmit. That's no. Yes.
Maybe a waiting period on that, Ed. I can't remember.
Yeah, but
Like there might be
basically you
a
can
waiting period.
eventually.
Well, I think the bottom line is it needs to be conveyed to the applicant that they need to have an up or down vote on June 18th.
I agree.
Mr. Whiting, I just wanted to second I'm Rose Kyle from Waverly Court. We're the neighbor closest to this property that's under review. And I just want to state clearly that what I think John is saying, and Mo also, is that we want to see the commission act to submit a recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, either yes or no, on June 18th. We're not asking for it, whether they show up and ask for another continuance or whatever. We want action by this commission on June 18th to submit your recommendation one way or another to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And then if the Board of Mayor and Aldermen wants to do whatever they have to do, okay. But Mark, if you need some input from the attorney, fine. But that's, I think, am I right, John? Am I right, Maul? That's our suggestion and proposal to you. A yes or no vote on June 18th. Is that clear?
I hear what you're saying.
Can I say something? We are all anxious to talk about this as well. We've been dealing with this as long as you have. So we're a little frustrated as well. Please don't think that by us sitting here that we're happy about this. I would like to have this discussed and moved along. So I'm frustrated as well. So please understand that there's legalities that we have to consider. It's their proposal. I'm not sure that we even legally can say yes or no if they withdraw it from the agenda. So we need to know that we're acting in a legally proper manner.
Thank you, Louise. I still need to say that I think we're allowing Continental and one property owner to define how we will do business in Farragut. We live here.
If you speak tonight, if you could please go to the microphone, I'd appreciate it.
I'll be brief. What I'm feeling is that Continental is dictating to us, to you, to the residents, the people who work in Farragut, how we're going to do business, when we're going to do business, and it's at their convenience. Why are we doing that? Isn't this our home? Shouldn't we be telling people from out of state, from Milwaukee or Menominee Falls or wherever they're from, that this is our home, and you need to do it on our timetable, and you have the power to act and to say yes or no and make a recommendation. Why are you unwilling to do that? Thank you. Why are you unwilling to act?
We want to make sure we're within the boundary of the law, and that I completely empathize with everybody that's here on this item. I've personally taken a lot of phone calls about this particular item, and completely understand your frustration. However, in the absence of our town attorney, in my years on the commission and my years as a citizen watching the commission, I've never seen this particular scenario play out before. And I'm not sure we have any kind of a precedent to say, well, this is what we do when this happens. And we just want to make sure we're doing it correctly. The last thing we want to do is get served with a lawsuit by someone or some party saying, well, you didn't do it correctly. And we just want to make sure we do it correctly.
Understand that. Can the minutes reflect then?
I think what I've proposed is putting them on notice, that putting on notice that they have to be here, or it's removed from the agenda.
Okay, I like that, Ed. I would like to see you strengthen that and say that we are going to vote, you are going to vote on the 16th, whether they are here or not, or the 18th.
I don't know what you're going to vote on without a discussion, but...
It's on the agenda. Why couldn't we vote on it?
Well,
What? Whether they're here or
I
not.
suppose if you wanted to, you could not leave it on the agenda and we could vote on it tonight.
I'd be happy with that.
I don't think so.
Okay, I still don't understand your reluctance to act, but would ask that we draw that line in the sand, put a stake in the ground on the 18th. That's it. We're tired of this. Many people here have devoted many hours, part-time. We all have full-time jobs. We're angry about this. I know you're frustrated too. Let's get on with it. Let's fish or cut bait.
And all of us up here are volunteers. We don't get paid a penny for this.
But this is your job that you've accepted to do, so do it.
We are doing it.
The request is to approve the agenda for tonight. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves about, I think it's perfectly reasonable to put in the minutes that the public input strongly encourages a vote on June 18th. I think that's pretty clear. We obviously would have to check with any legal questions if something changed in that regard, but I think we can certainly put that in the minutes that expresses the input that you provided this evening.
Thank you, Mark.
But again, the action before you right now is the approval of the agenda with the requested items that have that have been requested to be postponed, removed from the agenda.
Mr. Whiting, may I add one last sentence?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wonder if we couldn't satisfy both parties, you folks that do devote so much time to these efforts, not just our interest, number 7, but all of these others as well. If we could just have some proposal from you tonight that after consulting with the attorney, if next meeting, June 18th, you could legally have an up or down vote, period, to go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And if that would satisfy me, would that satisfy you, John and Maul? That's what all we're after is we want to stay within legal bounds, obviously. And so you can make your minutes read that if it's legally possible, that you have an up or down vote June 18th at the next meeting on your recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Simple as that. Would that satisfy all of us? Okay, thank you.
Will that work, Mark? Okay. Yeah, need the
We do
motion.
need a motion and action on the agenda
That's right.
itself.
We need a motion to
Motion to-
approve the motion with, approve the agenda with items.
Motion to approve the agenda with items 7, 10, and 18 removed, postponed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, okay. Next item is approval of the minutes of the April 16th Planning Commission meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Minutes are approved. Item 4 is discussion and public hearing on a re-subdivision plat for the Alexander Marion property, parcels 38 and 40, tax map 142, 627 Smith Road, and 12404 Union Road, zoned R1, 3.30 acres, and a variance request from the subdivision regulations requirement to construct sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities on the Smith Road and Union Road. Okay, Mark.
Okay, this property is kind of near the corner, the intersection of Smith and Union Road. This is a minor subdivision, just shifting a property line. There's an existing house on the property that faces Smith Road. The property on Union Road is vacant. And I think this is just a property owner that's selling or giving property to his son to build a house, is my understanding. So this is a very minor subdivision plat. In the subdivision regulations, however, where a subdivision of property fronts along a collector or an arterial street, both of these streets are classified as collector streets on the major road plan, then pedestrian facilities are to be constructed along those frontages. Due to the very minor nature of this subdivision plat, the applicant is requesting a variance from this requirement in the subdivision regulations. The staff supports this variance due to again, the very minor nature of the subdivision being requested. There will need to be 2 separate actions on this item. There'll need to be an action on the variance request and then an action on the plat itself. There was only a couple of minor comments left on the plat itself, and it was basically just a stray reference to 2.2 acres that just needs to be removed, and then labeling the legend on the plat, but those are very minor. I guess the first action needed is to take action on the variance request. Again, the staff does support that variance
Okay, so I have a motion to support the variance.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Are you up here, sir, to talk about this particular item?
If there's anything that I need to clear up on,
Okay, okay. Just answer questions or whatever, okay.
Sorry, that was so simple, I thought it was. Okay. Then we have approved, right? For everybody voted. Pardon?
Citizen questions?
Any questions?
The variance is not to have to put a sidewalk in, correct?
That's
Right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
This is pretty common. We've done this with some simple re-subdivision plats
Okay.
over the years when you're taking one or two lots and maybe adding one lot, or really in this scenario, you guys are just moving a property line. Well, actually, you're actually helping where the existing house is, moving the property line over, getting a little bit, so it's very simple and very common, this type of variance.
We already voted, I think. Okay. It's approved. And the second item.
Second is for the plat itself, yeah.
Approving,
We didn't vote, we just did a first and.
Second motion. I didn't
We
vote.
didn't vote yet. So we
Need
probably
to make
need
it
to vote.
official.
all in favor of the variance?
Aye.
The second item on the same thing is approval of the plat.
And that would be subject to the two minor comments the staff had remaining on the plat.
I'll make a motion to approve the plat, subject to the two staff comments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 5, discussion and public hearing on a plat of correction for Phase 1 of the Briarstone subdivision, formerly the villas at Anchor Park subdivision property, located on the north side of Turkey Creek Road across from Anchor Park, parcel 34, tax map 1531, Group B, zoned R1/OSMR, 23 lots, 9.8 acres. Salva Properties applicant.
The final plat for Phase 1 of Briarstone was actually approved back in February and recorded in late February. Since that time, the surveyor had discovered that there were some errors in some of the bearing labels associated with the plat, and this plat is really just a plat of correction to correct those bearing label errors, and also to replat a small section of a drainage easement that to get it out of an area where there's a covered porch on one of the units, one of the duplex units at the entrance to the subdivision. That covered porch wasn't shown on the original plat, so this is really just cleaning up those two items. The staff recommends approval of this plat of correction subject to the two items that are at your places.
Mark, has the as-built verified that, in fact, that porch is not built within a traditional setback of that drainage easement?
Yeah. The original plat didn't have a drainage easement back there. I'll just point that out. It's kind of a private, small-scale easement. There's a small section of storm sewer that starts on that lot going south, but the remainder of the drainage is open swell as you go up the hill, and it's partly being diverted in different locations toward the road to dissipate the energy and the volume.
I have a motion to approve the plat subject to staff comments.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 6, discussion and public hearing on a grading plan for the former John Deere site, parcel 77, tax map 151, zone C1, 13127 Kingston Pike, 3.28 acres, Robert Shagan, Commercial Realty applicant.
This is the property of the former John Deere site. Of course, the existing John Deere is just to the west of this on Kingston Pike. This site plan is just kind of a minor grading plan where they're kind of cleaning up some debris that had been buried in the area behind the building, behind the northernmost building, and then trying to basically, smooth it out and make it more presentable and marketable, just kind of clean some things up. This wasn't presented to you all last month because there had to be a determination made by TDEC about some depression areas. The areas where the proposed grading is occurring, there are no identified sinkholes. There is a sinkhole just outside of that they are staying out of, further to the north. And basically, the staff recommends approval of this grading plan subject to the two items that are before you, the providing for the letter of credit and addressing there's a tree that's shown on the plan that it didn't appear to be out in the field. I think I would have probably seen it, but I didn't find it. It's a 30-inch oak tree. Not sure what happened to it.
Mark, what was put in these trash pits?
I am not sure. You probably have to ask, I don't know if Will knows or Arthur.
Pallets is the last time that I saw it, years ago. They had ground up wood pallets. That's what it looked like, or wood chips. Arthur, are you here on behalf of Mr. Shagan?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
General debris, I think that's an adequate, accurate description. Oh, excuse me. Arthur Seymour, 550 West Main Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee. I think that's an accurate description of what has been put in there, yes. And we're fine with the conditions, certainly.
Yeah, basically everything, in this direction is undisturbed, north. Then, as you're going south toward Kingston Pike, that's the area of where they're proposing the grading. So in the sinkhole, there is a sinkhole, rather large sinkhole in this area right here. And I think there's another one right up in here, so. But they are staying out of those areas.
Any further questions?
The staff's visited the site and comfortable with the erosion control measures that are proposed?
Yeah, with the ones that are proposed on the plan, yes.
Okay. Make a motion to approve the grading plan subject to the two staff items.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes. Okay. Item 7 has been postponed. Item 8, discussion and public hearing on a request to rezone a portion of parcel 104, tax map 141, located at 421 Everett Road, 15.385 acres, from R1 to R1/OSR Homestead Land Holdings applicant.
This request is for a portion of what was the Longworth property off of Everett Road. It backs up to part of Fox Run, and Mr. Montgomery's property kind of surrounds it to the south and west. As you may remember, last October there was an initial request submitted to rezone the entire tract, but then there was some discussions that occurred and confusion, I guess, about some things about first rights to the property and so forth. And anyway, Mr. Montgomery had purchased that property and is now selling this portion to Homestead for the development of a subdivision. This particular piece of property it has kind of a drainage area, a wooded drainage area along the periphery. Let me see if I can kind of pretty much follows the western property boundary, and basically what they're requesting is to go to the open space residential zoning district, which in the staff's opinion is a good match for that property given its environmental conditions and characteristics. That allows them to leave that area undisturbed and incorporate that into the required 35% open space associated with this type of zoning district. In the comprehensive land use plan, this is specified as very low density residential, and this request is consistent with that. The staff recommends approval of resolution PC 15-06, which recommends approval of ordinance 15-07.
Mark, just to be clear, the stream follows the lot lines on the back of Fox Run. So,
Well, yeah,
when
it
turns-
doesn't go with that. Yeah, you're right.
Just because I know it's coming up for the next couple
Yeah,
we're talking about, so. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. You're right. But most of the property is an open field, if you've driven by there, so and it lays pretty well. And again, the staff feels that OSR is a good zoning district for that property. As you know, Everett Road it's a major collector street. It doesn't meet our standards for a major collector, but there was the Everett Road corridor fee ordinance that was passed a few months ago that this parcel is participating in. And as you probably know, the town is later this summer is going to be improving Everett Road. So the condition of the road is not an issue. That's why this was not workshopped, and there was no traffic impact study required for this rezoning request.
Why is the applicant asking for this?
You need to come to the mic if you want to say something, please.
Ken Fraser, Village Green. My question is, why is the applicant asking for this? What are his plans for this property? Why does he want this?
Well, that's the next item on the agenda, is the concept plan for this subdivision.
Okay,
Yeah, and
I'll get out of your way and
we'll show it,
move it
yeah.
along.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Subdivision of the property, basically, residential.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve resolution PC 1506?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item is discussion of public hearing on a concept plan for McKinley Station subdivision located at 421 Everett Road, a portion of parcel 104, tax map 1412, zone R1, 30 lots, 15.385 acres, homestead Land Holdings LLC applicant.
Okay, here's the answer to your question. This is the concept plan for the subdivision that has been referred to as McKinley Station. Basically, they are, as I mentioned earlier, protecting the tree-covered and stream portions of the property, which are kind of, you know, in all of this area, all that area that's encompassed in the yellow is one of the areas of open space. It's pretty much where most of the tree cover is as well. That's the benefit of the open space residential overlay. It allows you to you know, include that area toward your density, but it requires a lot more open space than a typical subdivision. So that's the layout. They're proposing a loop street, and the staff has 3 remaining comments on that. One, of course, is the property would have to be rezoned to open space residential. That would be going to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in June. And there is a plat which would establish this tract from which the subdivision will be platted that the staff is reviewing in consultation with the surveyor for the development, and that plat would have to be recorded to establish this parcel. And then the third thing was that the staff feels that there needs to be additional walking trail connection on this concept plan. There is one walking trail, and we understand that Everett Road's going to have a walking trail along the west side, but we also feel that to be consistent with what we've required of any other subdivision that I can think of in the town, all of them have multiple connections to different adjoining properties. The connection that they show right now, and it's fine, is over to the Quinn property. I think we would also like to see, you know, some kind of stub out to Fox Run, just in the event that Fox Run at some future date wanted to, you know, work with the town on a connection. That might be something that, you know, wouldn't be possible if that weren't provided for as part of this development. We're trying to think ahead and be proactive. Another possible location where we had talked about with the developer was just adding a connection over to the Montgomery property. Again, if that property were ever sold and developed, you know, it would provide for the opportunity to connect the two developments via a walking trail network, something that the town has always been very good at. So these are relatively minor suggestions that we feel would make the plan more consistent with other developments that have come before you.
All right. Have any comments from anybody?
I have a few questions. I'm not sure, that certainly doesn't show on the flood map, but the north, you know where the walking trail is? The current walking trail, where that ends, that area right there tends to flood. You know?
And that may not be the best place for it.
Well, I don't even have a problem if it's, you know, I just want to make sure that we're not contributing to more flooding.
Yeah.
Will that detention basin hold enough water? I'm not sure if you've ever seen how much it can flood right in that corner of that property. The property owners there have contended with flooding before.
Right. The way that we've designed this, we're reducing significantly the amount of area that will actually drain to that corner when we're done.
Okay.
where I've located, and Mark and I had discussed it in the staff developer meeting, is to run a walking trail down to that corner, because there's none of our property abuts any common area of Fox Run. It only abuts individuals' homes.
Yep.
So it's unlikely that there'll ever be somebody will grant a 20-foot easement beside their house to put a walking trail. But I did keep it, rather than hitting the dead corner, stayed out of the stream buffer required by Farragut ordinance.
Okay.
I don't want to put a walking trail in a stream buffer. So that's why I placed it where I did, because that's really with the exception of the portion on the southern end that Montgomery is keeping, that's the only undeveloped tract that would have the potential to connect, unless one of the homeowners in Fox Run wanted to have a walking trail right next to their house. So,
One thing is, you remember when we approved split rail, we do have a walking trail that goes down to Fox Run between two side property lines, which is common practice in the town. It may never, ever be extended, and it would certainly not be something the town would force upon anyone. But if you've got it there is at least an opportunity, should Fox Run want to do that someday, they would have the ability to do that without having to worry about someone providing the connection on property they have no control over.
Well, and I'm sorry, that property, the development on that, the house on that is further away from where you're proposing.
Right.
So there's an empty space there.
that was the only logical place. And we don't have a problem stubbing it out, but we don't want to build into the regulatory stream buffer.
I understand. And neither do
Because
I.
we don't have a need to do that.
Yeah.
So to connect it would require a state aquatic resource alteration permit, because that is Little Turkey Creek is a jurisdictional stream, and you would have to figure out how to mitigate going into the stream buffer. And many of the subdivisions that he referenced of requiring greenway trail connectors, we actually built and built the connectors. So we have no problem with it. We're just trying to do what's logical and what makes the most sense. So
I understand. Now I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's why I picked that corner, because it would be easily accessible.
Yeah.
And we can give an easement on the whole corner to the town, and if people want to connect, you can connect however you want to connect, but we don't want to cross the stream. It's because it goes to nowhere right now. So.
Yep. I have another.
Yeah, and I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to do the stream necessarily. I was just basically making a general suggestion that we need to look for an opportunity to try to connect to Fox Run. That may not be the place, but somewhere along that interface, there might be an appropriate logical connection.
On the other end, that's the flattest area of the creek, of the periphery. As we get on down, moving south along the creek, our property is very sloped at 15 to 18%. So it would be difficult it would take a lot more clearing and earth moving to try to build a trail in there. So that's really the logical corner. We can connect next to lot 17 between the other pond and do a mirrored to Montgomery up there that would parallel the one 100 feet away on the street that we're building with the road improvements.
And just for clarity, I know I'm fairly sure I know the answer for this. There's a tree line over there right along the stream. I assume that's untouched. You don't go in there to.
No.
You won't be grading in there at all.
No.
Okay.
And there is a tree protection plan with this, and we actually have design plans finished, and we're not getting into that tree row.
Okay.
There's a few trees up around the existing house that 2 or 3 that will most likely come down, more so from the house demolition and filling in the basement, but not the natural vegetated buffer around the creek remains.
Okay.
Which is the benefit of the OSR zoning is being able to do that.
Yep.
The areas that,
Name, please.
again,
The name.
Ken Fraser, Village Green. The areas that appear to be unbuildable, in other words, you couldn't put homes there, is the identification of those areas as OSR a means by which you can retain R1 zoning? In other words, you have 15 some odd acres there, and some are not usable for homes. But by designating that OSR, does that get you the ability to retain the R1 designation?
Well, the base zoning is R1, and that's what the density for this subdivision is based on. And the density allowance in R1, where sanitary sewer is available, which is the case, of course, here, is a 20,000 square foot lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you take the entire tract area, multiply it by 43,560, and divide it by 20,000. That tells you how many lots you could have potentially.
Using the 15 some odd acres
Yes,
as a
you
starting
use-
point?
You use the entire tract.
Right.
So you're getting to count those areas that aren't buildable in toward your density. That's the benefit of the OSR. What the OSR really ends up with is generally smaller lots that are concentrated more on more, easily developable portions of a property. And
But
they
the
leave-
subdivision can still be designated R1?
It is R1.
It is R1.
R1 with an open space residential overlay.
Which are areas that you can't build on?
Yes, those open space areas would be platted on the final plat for this as permanent open space. That would be, if they don't really need to be maintained, but they would be owned and maintained by the homeowners association.
If you took your scissors and trimmed off all the land that you can't build on, would you still be able to designate the remaining area as R1?
There's no minimum
No,
lot size.
because the lot sizes would,
Well, then my...
I'm not sure what your question is on that.
Well, then my question originally was, the unbuildable areas that give it the OSR designation appear to me to be like a gimmick to allow you to retain R1 zoning for the subdivision.
Well, the R1 establishes the density.
Yeah, and if you were to take your scissors and trim off all the land that you can't build on, take that away from your tract,
Yeah.
then you couldn't call it R1. Is that what you're
You
saying?
couldn't call it R1 based on those lot sizes, no.
The lots would be too small. And you would still have to dedicate 10% instead of the 35%
So
open space.
then, am I correct that giving OSR to these unbuildable areas allows you, or it's a means by which you can retain R1 zoning?
The whole property is R1 OSR, not just the open space.
Well, right now, it's nothing. There's nothing there.
R1 right now,
It's designated R1.
yeah.
And that was probably because it wasn't determined at some time in the past that this was not totally buildable on.
The number of dwelling units they're showing there would be, you couldn't get any more than that under R1. I mean, R1 is the same density as what they've got. That's just the base zone that establishes the density. This just gives someone more flexibility and more ability to provide protection to an adjoining subdivision like Fox Run in this case, because it requires 35% open space. That's a substantial area.
Well, it appeared to me to be a gimmick to keep the R1 designation by using OSR. That's all I was asking.
Yeah,
I guess it's
I hate to use the word gimmick, but that's what it boils down to.
It's important that in your zoning classification, you're R1 OSR or you're R1, but you can't be a combination of both. The idea behind this years ago, as the town developed the easy properties and we started getting into the more difficult, challenging properties, and developers said, well, hey, I want to develop 90% of it because that's what our ordinance allowed.
Yeah.
We started looking at ways to save some of the areas that we consider environmentally sensitive. And so one of the things that we decided to do some years ago, probably in about '06 is my best guess, is we decided to create a zoning district that is modeled after the R1 density, but allows somebody to go smaller lots, roughly equal density, and but they have to dedicate 35% of their total land area to permanent open space.
Why wouldn't he develop it as R2 then?
Well, they would be eligible to request R2 zoning. Part of Fox Run is R2, part of Fox Run is R1. There might be an argument to say that's compatible zoning. Personally, I'd like to see R1 OSR on areas that have more environmentally sensitive areas, whether they're steep slopes or a special grove of trees or sinkholes or creeks, because of what it does is it gives an incentive, a quid pro quo for the developer to say, okay, we'll let you go a little smaller lots. However, you're going to have to dedicate more of your land area. And of course, when they're developers dedicating more of the land area, those are dollars that they're setting aside that they're not going to be able to build houses on. In all application, the R1 OSR generally might allow a couple of more houses in application. The reason being is if you take 10 acres, just because it's easy math, and you immediately take off lot 10% for your open space under traditional R1, and then you put in your right-of-ways, which are 50 feet wide, and then you put in your 20,000 square foot lots, you're going to get roughly 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 lots per acre, versus the OSR, it allows you to maybe get up to more like 1.8, 1.9. It'd be tough to get 2.0 lots per acre. So in general application, you might get 1 or 2 more lots, but most importantly, you're getting more ground left undisturbed.
Yeah.
And so that's really the goal, especially when we deal with mature trees in the town of Farragut. We really try to bend over backwards and figure out whatever we can do to require and then incentivize that developer to save those trees.
Yep, okay.
Did we answer your question? I'm not sure.
Really, you have. By designating these unbuildable areas as part of the OSR designation, it allows you to keep R1 in the mix.
It actually,
and I guess it's attractive to some people.
Well, it is attractive as we look at more properties that are more challenging to develop.
But they are smaller lots.
Yeah, absolutely, they are smaller lots. Fox Run has either a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet or a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. Again, that's the R2, R1 side of Fox Run. These lots are, maybe their smallest lots 10,000 square feet, and their largest lots probably 18,000 square feet. So generally speaking, you do get smaller lots.
It's kind of misleading, and I worry about that we're watering down the R1 designation. I live in R2, and it worries me what's going to happen to R2 with the path that we seem to be on in the town of Farragut.
Well, we would love some guidance. We've actually talked at other meetings about taking some other zoning districts and applying some of the same open space principles that we've used. We've just we created one that was an R6 last year that actually required the developer to set aside 50% of the entire property as permanent open space. Obviously, when you're dealing with a really challenging piece of property and we're trying to figure out a way that to best respect the property and the topography and the ecology of it, those things make a lot of sense. So we would love your input as we talk about maybe an R2 in the future in the OSR. And because that's kind of how we come up with a good zoning district is to try to fully understand what the possible pitfalls are and what the incentives are.
Well, I appreciate your patience in answering my questions.
Sure. Thank you, Ken.
Can I just make a point here? With this particular property, what I pointed out to you is they have some serious flooding issues in one area.
I gathered that from...
So, to me, I get the smaller, the drawback is the smaller lot sizes, but you put that against flooding issues, and I'll do anything that takes away the flooding issues to the existing homeowners. So this is a perfect compromise for that, because there's a steep hill on the edge of this property. It protects that stream. It keeps these current homeowners from being flooded out. I mean, they could build an R2, and they could, I think they would be permitted to build closer to this and create a big problem for these existing neighbors. This zoning protects those existing neighbors.
Well, I'm always impressed with the knowledge that you folks have, whereas my wife and I, we don't know all the names of the streets all the time that we're discussing here, and I'm always impressed with your knowledge of particular pieces of land and flooding issues.
I
and
live in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And Noah used to live in the neighborhood, so sensitive to that.
It's outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
We would like your input when we start talking about some of these other OSR overlays in the future.
Well, it's the apartment business that really concerns me.
Understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Doris Reed, and I think she just answered a few of my questions, but just some clarification. I do live in Fox Run, and I do back up to the creek. And so I just wanted to ask, how far from the creek will it not be developed? Like 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet? So like the creek is...
It varies from 50 to, and I think in some places, almost 150 feet away.
And like, are you planning to do like any cleaning out of the scrub brush and just leaving major trees? Or you just going to leave it natural as it is?
Natural.
Or what?
Natural.
Okay. And as some have pointed out, there is flooding, and there is bad flooding in Fox Run, right adjacent. On my map here, at the point is where I am. And that floods off from the hill of Fox Run all the way down in there. Lots. I mean, just this past spring, there was lots of flooding there. And so, like, for drainage, like, well, for grading, are you grading toward the... Away from the...
Yeah. Just to clarify, state law and local ordinance prohibits the development of any property to increase the rate of flow or the location of flow on a downstream neighbor. So whatever plans that we create, that the town approves, has to meet those guidelines, and we have to show through mathematical modeling that there will be no increase of water on any downstream neighbor. So I can tell you the way that I've designed this, we're significantly reducing the amount of water going to Little Turkey Creek because of the way we're regrading the lots. Basically, we're developing the open field and leaving all the woods, and we're taking everything over to primary detention pond, routing it back down the other direction.
So basically, about what are the sizes of the lots? I couldn't see from the map.
They range from around 10,000 square feet to 18,000 square feet. They're basically 76 foot wide by somewhere between 130 to 150 foot deep.
Is that almost like zero lot line?
No.
Okay.
There's
some subdivisions, just for your visual reference, that are already developed as open space residential. Sheffield off of Turkey Creek Road, the Cove at Turkey Creek behind Regal Cinemas, Bridgemore actually is an open space residential development. There's a number of them. It's a very popular zoning district because it does give that flexibility and lessens the amount of disturbance on a tract. So the lots are smaller, that's true, but that, I think if you go to those subdivisions, you'll see that they're very high quality.
I'm familiar with those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Russ, are you able to get these lots that are like 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, are you able to get those to the stormwater to gravity flow back over to the detention ponds? Because to me, topographically, it seems like that's the low point of the property.
Yes.
So you just got some really deep stormwater pipe.
No, we're taking basically the building envelope to the front of the lot. Now the backyard will be a slope that goes down in the current direction, but by doing that, we're taking the impervious area, the roof and hardscape back towards the road into the
sending
storm
it to the
drainage
street.
system. Right.
And then you're able to get it over to the detention
Get it
pond.
over to the detention
You have
pond.
enough fill on that site, cut and fill, to be able to balance that? At least you
Close.
You hope.
I'm close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions or comments?
I think we got a good plan. I would like to see that walking trail connection over on the south end of the property that would maybe tie into some future development on the Montgomery side. So that was, I think, what was proposed. Russ, were you thinking next to that detention pond, next to lot 17?
Yeah, Bob said he was okay with that. It's going to be difficult to fit it in there with the pond and the emergency spillway and swell for the pond and the head wall for the pipe coming out of the pond. And
Well, if you had to snake it across the top of the berm, you could kind of snake it across the top of the berm and then roll down, couldn't you?
Well, I guess that's up to the town.
Maybe leave that. The town has been pretty flexible in the past about working in the field on those walking trail connections, trying to figure out what's the best way topographically to create something that somebody can actually use instead of a 15% walking trail, which nobody likes.
Right.
So,
We'll-
does that make
we'll
sense,
make it-
Mark?
Now, we can field
figure it out.
locate the walking trail connection and, where it makes sense.
Yeah, we're fine with that.
Okay, guess we need a motion to approve the concept plan, subject to the comments, but I think it might need a slightly amendment of the ones about the walking trails that Stubbs has discussed, if possible.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion if that's all right.
Okay.
Motion to approve the concept plan as designed, subject to the staff's comments, as well as the walking trail connection on the south end next to the lot 17 and the proposed detention pond.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
10 was postponed. Item 11, discussion on a request to amend the 2012 comprehensive land use plan for the property located at the West Village Veterinary and to the east of former Phillips 66 on Kingston Pike, 16.3 acres from office/light industrial to mixed-use Tom Center. Greg Allen, applicant for discussion only. Okay.
Okay, just to give you a little bit of background here, we did talk about this in April. It was a long meeting, as you know. I think this one's going to be equally long. So we kind of ran out of time, basically, to talk about some things that Mr. Allen wanted to discuss, dealing with the current language in the town center district, because he needs some guidance on some things in order to know whether he wants to proceed with the amendment to the comprehensive land use plan and the subsequent item on the agenda, the rezoning to the town center district. When we looked at the request itself on its merits, I think you all and the staff feel that we're really excited about this. This property is kind of sandwiched in between areas that are already identified as part of the mixed-use town center. It's adjacent to a school and park, the outdoor playground. It's got a lot of really good things going for it. It's got the floodplain on the west side that could be an amenity and an outdoor gathering venue area. I think I alluded to a few items that we needed a little further discussion on last time. And there are really three items that we were wanting to get some clarification on. How parking spaces are allocated in the town center district, the maximum height that's currently permitted in the town center district, and signage. Signage is actually addressed in the municipal code. There's design requirements that were adopted as part of the town center district when that was created back in 2007 that deal with signage. So I guess we'll talk about these in order. The first one was parking space allocations. The way that parking is currently provided for in the town center district is that it's based on the floors. It's one space per 250 square feet of gross floor area on the first floor. That's going to be your retail and office, probably mostly retail. Then your non-ground floor, your second floor is one space per 500 square feet of gross floor area, and then the third and fourth floors are one space per 750. The ratios that I think the applicant's okay with the first floor, the retail, as far as I know, 1 per 250, but he's asking that the ratios be revisited for the non-ground floors. As you know, we recently updated the R6 multifamily district. Since these non-ground floors in the mixed-use town center would mostly be residential, I mean, there could be some offices, I suppose, but I think it would mostly be residential. The question is whether having a ratio more in line with our recent updates to the R6 would be better for these non-ground floors. When we updated R6, we lowered the old requirement that was 2.25 parking spaces per unit to 1.75. You know, we had a lot of discussion about that. That seemed to be pretty much the industry standard in this region in general. And the staff is very open and supportive of having the parking revisited. Anything that can lower the amount of parking, as long as there's still obviously enough for the project so that it's viable, the staff would certainly support that. And that could mean that the the non-ground floor allocation would be more something in line with what we did in the R6 zoning district. So I don't know if, Craig, if you had anything to add to that particular
You just keep
item.
talking, you're saying what I was going to say.
Yeah. So does anybody have any feelings or thoughts? You know, when we created the town center district, I'm very proud of it. I think you all and everybody involved spent a lot of time on it. We looked at a lot of projects. I think it's a great zoning district, great design requirements. Sometimes things come up, though. Things change, and conditions change, markets change, and sometimes things need to be revisited. And I think this is probably one of them. So, how do you all feel about that?
Designate that, separate it out and say if it's office, if second floor is office space, this many parking spots. If second floor is residential, this many parking spots.
Yeah, I've thought about that. Yeah, that is a little bit, I mean, you could say if it's designed to be a dwelling unit, it would be, based on the 1.75 ratio or whatever. If it's office, then maybe stick with the 1 per 500 square foot on the second floor, and then 750 on the third and fourth floors. I think that would be.
Is that what the designations are for office space? What we have outlined here is?
Some office spaces, just in regular C1, some are 1 per 250, some are 1 per 300. It just depends on the type of office. 1 per 500 would be, pretty low.
Pretty minimal.
Requirement, but that's okay because there's a lot of this stuff relates to timing.
Yep.
But that's the idea behind the mixed use, is that your peaks are different. So if you're going to have somebody in there for offices, they're probably going to go home at night versus in your residents are going to come in. So that's why we allowed some of these these lower threshold numbers. Craig, what are you thinking as far as a mixture of office? Because we got to deal with that because there is definitely going to be a difference between your office and your residential units.
So right now, my thinking is everything above the first floor will be residential.
Okay.
But I would really like, rather than, as I told y'all in this proposal I gave everyone, that I think there's a need for more units there. So I think there's a need for doing another story.
We'll talk about that. I'm trying to keep it organized.
One item at a time.
I've got that one.
Well, they kind of go together because your parking is related to the density.
I'm supportive of the parking. I'm not so crazy about the height request because it does add more parking. So if we're trying to lessen parking in one amendment, we're adding more in another. And The height thing, and we do have a number of five-story buildings that the applicant provided that, I mean, to me, very attractive. But, you know, the question is, you know, on this project, there's at least 4 freestanding buildings. You know, currently the town center district allows you to go up to 4 stories. You know, adding another story to that on a relatively small parcel, frankly. I don't know if that might be a little overwhelming, or almost be urban in appearance rather than suburban. That's one of my concerns, and the other is just that it's going to add more parking, and you're going to have more area that's going to be disturbed on the property in all likelihood. But I don't know how you all feel about that. They do, of course, as you said, they are interrelated. So maybe if y'all want to talk about either of those items right now, we'd like to have your input.
I, for one, would support the 1 3/4 parking spaces per unit, and what would be nice about it is it doesn't necessarily penalize the developer from building a larger unit. So if somebody wanted a 3,000 square foot unit versus a 1,000 square foot unit, you don't necessarily get penalized for that. I'm having a little bit more difficult time with getting my arms around and getting warm and fuzzy with the 5 stories, but maybe this would be a time if. Does everybody in the audience know generally with the location that we're talking about for this? Is everybody's, maybe it'd be kind of interesting to have some citizens that would have some thoughts one way or another, as we've really tried over the years to try to create a catalyst for what we hope will be somewhat of a downtown Farragut, and we're hoping that this might be one of the cogs in the wheel that would help us create some synergy and try to have a downtown that Farragut never really had. And so we're right here. We're kind of in a uncharted territory. We have spent some time with some zoning districts trying to create some incentives and some allowances for developers to be able to do some interesting things that haven't been available. So if anybody has any questions, we'd love to hear it, as well as what we're talking about, 4 stories versus 5 stories.
Well, let me ask this question. Based on the areas that you're going to cover with buildings and pavement and everything else, the permeable area, what percentage of that would be of the whole?
About 50%, isn't it? Close to it.
My name is Michael Versa. I'm a landscape architect planner working with Mr. Allen. The building footprint, whether and the parking requirement, whether it's a 4 or 5-story building, would really not change that much as far as the amount of area that it takes. But there are opportunities, and we've discussed that in workshops, to work in decorative permeable pavings throughout the site to minimize it. We work with our engineer, and he's very capable as far as handling any stormwater runoff and so on. The good thing about the workshop is that it also brought out some opportunities, and the drawing you see before you is to really be a very site-specific design, in the sense that we've asked for a proposal to adjust the landscape buffer requirements. On one side there is essentially an open play field, on the other side is a nicely treed area that ties in with an outdoor classroom, and we wanted to adjust proportion-wise these buffers so that we can enhance one and certainly not detract from the other. In regard to the 4 or 5-story building requirement, sometimes all this comes down to chocolate vanilla. It's which flavor do you really prefer? I will tell you that when we were going through pictures such as the ones you see here, it's very hard to separate many times a 4 and a 5-story building. It sounds like a lot, but visually it doesn't. The fact that these buildings are set back quite far from Kingston Pike is another factor in their favor. So that was, I think, one of the requirements, that we have a block of paving that's going to have to go in to supplement with roads and underground parking for these buildings. We're saying, why not go ahead and take the opportunity to maximize the amount of amenities that you offer to residents here with more housing.
Okay, so you're saying about 50% permeable?
Yeah, it's shown at 53%. And the parking that we're showing on our plan now, if you use a new ratio of 1.75, you can get, we would be able to use that same parking scheme we're showing for another floor. We're not changing the parking amount. The amount of parking spaces would be the same, we just have more units, and with the 1.75, that works out.
Okay, thanks.
Go back to your point, Noah. I'm just trying to show the people here where this property is. I'm sorry. The high school access off Campbell Station Road is here. Wait a minute. Hold on. Oh.
You had it right, Mark.
Right, but I was my board working here. Let's see. Here we go. Sorry. Operator error. Happens a lot. But that's the access drive up to the high school off Campbell Station Road. Campbell Station Road is here. The intersection of Kingston Pike and Campbell Station is here. So you got the Village Vet clinic is here. So it's basically the property that is east of the creek on Kingston Pike and west of the high school. This property here, that's the property where this request is being made. So that just kind of orients you to where we're talking about. So yeah, we can go back to your discussion. Okay, yeah, it's
across the creek.
It is actually right. It is here, maybe.
It might be the auto repair.
Okay, then it's here. It's that one. The outdoor classroom is here. The Phillips 66 is there. So it's kind of a hidden piece of property, really. There aren't any subdivisions around it, which, is a nice thing. And it's there adjacent to the school and pretty close to the park, right next to the outdoor classroom. So it does have a lot of, potential for a town center. And that's something that was expressed as the most important strategy when we updated our comprehensive plan when we got public comments, and they wanted Farragut to have a town center. They wanted to have Farragut to have that identity, that sense of place that a town center can provide, instead of basically, being subdivisions and shopping centers. That if you had an actual downtown, a town center, it would give the community more of a sense of place.
This is just discussion tonight.
Yeah, this is just discussion. Yeah, and I think we were talking about the height when we
Go back to those other photographs.
buildings.
Yeah. Were you thinking one of these photographs over the other from an architectural
The
standpoint?
first one I like better.
Because that one to me, that one you like better?
No, the one,
Yeah. See, that one to me, and maybe it's because it's the pitched roof, it looks higher.
no, the next one over, the next one.
Oh, this one.
The round turret.
That one,
That one.
okay. That one doesn't look as high.
Really, when we went looking around, it's the thing, you have to count the floors to determine whether it's a four-story or a five-story.
That's true.
I mean, I go all over the place, and it's really, you have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to see whether you got 5 or 4 stories. And like Mike was saying, we are isolated to a degree where we're at, so that we're not right on Kingston Pike. You're not showing a big building right on Kingston Pike, and two of the buildings are adjacent to the practice field and the football field.
And we do have a 5-story building in the town. It is one of the Parkside Medical or It's not the medical plaza, it's Parkside 1 or 2, I guess it's 1, the 5-story building, so. Mr. Frazier, did you have a comment?
Yes, sir. Ken Fraser, back again from Village Green. I'm just a poor retired engineer, and I don't know how dumb you think we are. But when you stand here and say, well, it could be 4 floors or it could be 5, and there's going to be residential from the first floor up, that's all going to be residential. And it doesn't make any difference. You just passed off very, very cavalierly. It doesn't hurt the parking one way or the other. I think it makes a big difference to the residents in that apartment house if whether it's 4 floors or 5 floors. It's going to affect their parking. It doesn't have minimal effect. It has an effect.
I think there was, maybe it was a miscommunication, but we're saying that the site plan that we have, without adding any more concrete, enlarging it, will afford a 5-story building if the parking requirement is proportion to what is normally in an R6 apartments. So we're just saying it wasn't a matter that they were going to lose parking. They're not. They're going to still have the same amount of parking as what is necessary in the zoning.
Right. That's the same amount of parking.
Per unit.
Mr.
The
Frazier?
same ratio of parking per unit, not numbers.
So where are you getting this added space from?
I have an answer for you. Our current restrictions on parking are per square foot, not per unit. In the town center district, we have it as per square foot, correct?
Well,
And
floor area,
he is
so-
asking
I'm
to
just
move.
simple, but I think there's more square feet in 5 floors versus 4.
Well, that's what he's asking, to move it, change it from per square foot to per unit, which is how we measure apartments.
It's the same, you'd get the same amount of parking that you would get in apartments.
Under the current ratio, you count
This is
like
the-
stairwells and everything, because it's gross
Mr.
floor
Frazier,
area.
you are correct. The ratio is, we are talking about changing the ratio tonight. And so there, in all application, there's going to be the same number of parking spaces, but more units. So you are correct with that. But we have felt like, as we work through the apartment zoning, that we felt like that we have overparked that requirement. We've over-allocated, we've had too much parking. We've actually spent some time looking at apartment complexes and once we felt like we found the right number of parking, that's the number we're trying to use. Right now, we think, but with the plan that Mr. Allen has proposed, we think he would have a bunch of empty parking spaces that never get used, and there's no reason to have empty parking spaces. Either A, reduce the size of the parking lot, or what Mr. Allen's talking about is saying, hey, can I go up another story? And that's kind of what we're talking about is and they're all interrelated.
But when you started the discussion, it was based on 4 floors and a certain ratio.
Yes.
And then I heard that, well, we'll make it 5 floors, and that doesn't change the parking situation. Something's wrong with that statement, because you've got more people now in the apartments.
You're right. Absolutely, yes, sir, you're correct.
So I think you have to look at the parking situation in those terms. It's not just something you brush off, it's the same. It is not the same.
We're trying to brush it off. We were just making.
Well, that was the tone, I'm sorry.
I'm
The
sorry,
parking we're providing now would suit the same, another floor of apartments because of changing the ratio. The parking we have now is 933 parking spaces.
Changing the ratio affects the number of spaces you have with respect to the number of apartments, isn't that so?
Right. We want more apartments. So we're changing the ratio, but we're providing enough parking spaces on our plan now to satisfy the new ratio of 1.75.
I look forward to the Planning Commission to settle this business. I think you know what my concern is, because it doesn't add up in my simple mind.
It's complicated. And that's what we're here to discuss, is to see if this is something of value that we want to pursue, or there are other caveats that maybe we don't understand yet. Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
I have a question. how do you, if you're going to have, say you have the second floor is going to be office, you decide there's some office space demand. How do you count that as a unit if it's an open office?
Well,
I'm just
that's part of
thinking-
my concern is you'd have to know exactly how you're going to use it when you build it.
I think we need to address that in here, if, in general, because if they're not going to use it for office space, someone else might in some other area of town center district, and there is a difference. And I get that people during the day, the residents will be leaving and those spaces will be open, but we still don't have a way of, if we go to how we measure it with apartment units, we don't have a way of assessing for office space.
Well, if Mr. Allen is prepared to commit to residential and retail, then it makes this process a little bit easier. What would make it difficult is if he wants to reserve the flexibility in the future, then this is going to be a challenge to try to figure this out, because at some point, you're going to say, okay, you got to stop. You can't build out that particular unit because you're out of parking. And obviously, he doesn't want that.
And the building code's going to be different, too.
That's correct.
Residential versus office. So, I mean, you're going to have to know what
Up
you're doing up front.
Well, but that would happen when you submit the plans, because that is a review process too.
Correct.
So at that point, you would review it and say, hey, you can't do that because you don't have enough spaces, or you can do it because you do have enough spaces. But the buildings are all come back before you guys for approval. That's part of the process.
But that being said, I would support the 1.75 spaces, specifically 1.75 per unit on residential.
On residential.
So, and taking office and retail out of it, because all that would not work for office or retail.
I agree with that.
But it does work for residential.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, that's our intent, is for
Right.
residential.
Now, but we still got to figure out the 4-story versus 5-story.
Mm-hmm. And I just think, as I told y'all in the thing I gave each one of y'all, I think there's a need for more people there, because what you want to do in a town center is create a synergy where there's enough people to go down to the restaurants and the ice cream shop and help pay for their costs, their overhead. And so the more people that are there, the better chance you have of creating enough demand for whatever to eat or drink or whatever.
One thing you need to be cognizant of is that, we're talking about changing the town center district, so that would apply to any parcel that would be part of the town center district. So whatever language, y'all want to come up with or ask the staff to look into it, we have to keep that in mind, that what are the impacts on other projects. We know Craig may build this exactly like, what he says, and that's fine, but what does it mean for someone else that might want to participate in the town center district? And, so the 5-story thing and the parking, I'm certainly open to, if it's a residential unit, 1.75, I think is, I'm supportive of that. I think that's reasonable. The question of how you deal with the non-ground floor, non-residential is one that I had when I was thinking about this too, because it's the 1.75 wouldn't relate to that. So there probably needs to be some language in there that maybe retains the 500 and 750 if it's a non-residential, portion of a building that's constructed as such.
I have a question, I guess, more for clarity. If, say you have a 5-story building and the bottom is commercial and the top floors are all residential, are we going to have an allotment of spaces for the commercial as well as the apartments, or is it just the allotment of spaces is in consideration of only the living units?
No, it's both.
It's both.
The first
Okay.
floor has to be the 1 per 250 of gross
Okay.
floor area.
Okay.
Then the remaining floors, however many there are, would be based on however it's.
Okay.
In total.
Yeah.
I have a question there.
it seems the problem is that they created too many parking spaces. The problem that we're trying to avoid is trying to get rid of the green spaces. I don't see why we have to build another floor. Why can't we just cut down the parking spaces?
What's your name, sir? What is your
I'm sorry, Young Bradley, Cottage Creek.
That's a good point.
I mean, just because they created, if they decided to create more parking space, are they going to say, well, we have more parking space, so let's put 6 floors on it? I mean, come on, that was, and all the people that's right there, the traffic is already horrendous there already. Putting more people there is going to create more traffic. I don't see the benefit of that. I like the idea of town center. And to be honest, I don't really know what that means because it's not been explained to me. But all I see is every morning as I drive through there, there's tons of traffic there. Now you're going to put more traffic, more people. So the argument is we got too many parking spaces. So we're going to put another floor on it. It seems like not a very reasonable argument here. Seems like something that's kind of been already maybe planned, should I say. Let's put more parking space so we can say we need another floor. So I don't know. This doesn't seem reasonable to me.
How many of the 933 are underground?
I'd have to look it up.
Okay, just like
But
70%, 50%?
Yeah, the entire footprint of the building has the underground parking.
Okay.
And
so-
the other areas have a covered parking area.
Okay.
Yeah, and that underground is primarily for the residential. They'd get on they'd go park underground, get on an elevator, and go up to their units. And the main level floor is mainly for the commercial.
Anybody else in the audience have some thoughts about 4-story versus 5-story and the character? We'd love to hear from you.
Up to the,
Greg, have you put those numbers together?
Yeah, and I gave them to Mark. It's somewhere between 250 and 300. Mm-hmm.
well, that did it.
Mary Bland, 433 Grinstead. Has the city taken into account adding 300 complexes in that location, the impact on the schools in the area? Just a comment for thought.
I'm going to say, address that. We are in Fox Run. We were rezoned to Hardin Valley a few years ago. Knox County Board of Education went to great pains to remind us that these are Knox County schools, not Farragut schools. And there's a lot of Farragut students that live in Farragut that don't attend Farragut schools. And there's a lot of students that don't live in Farragut that attend Farragut schools. So I would rather see a Farragut resident attending school zoned in Farragut. I can't worry about that as much because the Knox County schools have reminded us these are not our schools.
Hi, Jen Goforth, Cottage Creek. Along the lines of this, and in addition to the schools, thank you, honey, has there been a road study done? Just because, as Yang said, the traffic there is horrendous, and while they're Farragut, I mean, it's Farragut roads that we're all on, and we're residents of Farragut dealing with these roads. The schools are there's nothing that can be done there, we understand, but the roads are horrendous in that area. And as somebody that's used the sidewalks for bicycling, I mean, you take your life in your hands around that intersection and along that stretch of road. So are there plans to do a road study?
There will be a requirement for a traffic impact study.
Okay.
But what we're trying to get some resolution on, and we're kind of very early in the process, is just some of these key points that the applicant wanted to discuss further to know whether they would be interested, I think, in moving forward. But yeah, definitely, and we understand that, you know, adding that many more units is going to have a big traffic impact, and we would require that prior to any action being formally taken by the Planning Commission. We'd have to review it and analyze it So that would be a requirement.
Okay. And there isn't any other land around this that would be an extension of the town center? This is kind of it, right? Unless there was something that happened with the ball fields?
Town center goes across where we're hoping.
Well, as far as an
Okay.
extension from that property,
landlocked.
It's kind of
never
landlocked.
say never, but it would,
Yeah.
be fairly challenging
Okay.
and fairly unlikely.
Yeah, I would say that, if we were talking about 50 apartments, it's a very different story than almost 300, so.
Yeah.
I'm David Harbin, the engineer for this project. Just want to point out that, I don't believe there's any town centers in Farragut right now. This is, as an engineer, this is the perfect place for a town center. You're basically at the intersection of two arterial roads. If you don't put one in this position, I don't know anywhere else in the town of Farragut that's more ripe to have a town center. Yes, we'll have to do a traffic impact study. Mr. Allen's prepared to upgrade that school access road with that extra traffic signals, and there may be others. So, like I said, this is just the ideal place. If you want a town center in Farragut, this would be the ideal place for it, for a traffic point. Thanks.
My question for you is, how long is that exit driveway?
For the school access?
The one that exits out onto Kingston Pike.
That is about 300 feet long right there.
I have to admit that when I look at this project, it's an interesting project, but to me, the traffic coming out, I can't imagine how difficult it would be to get out of there in that location. And I assume you guys have looked at that.
Well, that'll be part of the traffic impact study. So, there are other issues that we have to work through before we actually do the study right there.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things that we will have to address during our review.
I suspect that you would end up with traffic signals at both of those.
More than likely.
Entrances with the traffic that you generate.
More than likely, yes.
But you can get out to a signal on Kingston Pike there by,
Going to the Village Vet?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that would be pretty close to have two lights. And that's fairly close to the light on the corner, isn't it?
You've got the Kroger light?
Light there?
Well, you got the Kroger light where the fuel pumps are, and then you got the other one at Campbell Station and Kingston Pike.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the separation distance is, but, there's no doubt that traffic would probably warrant a light there.
My name's Ron Williams. As far as the 4-story and the 5-story, I don't think the difference there is that if you look at how a place like in Huntersville, North Carolina, how they built Burksdale Village, it's kind of a staggered effect based on how the usage is. And when you look at that and how they have the traffic flow in and out of that area right there with the lights, I think that would go a long ways in looking at how you could navigate and get the traffic in and out in a normal way. Of course, like they said, in the mornings or in the afternoons at peak times, you're going to have heavy traffic. If we grow this town, we're always going to have heavy traffic. It's a town center is going to be there eventually, one way or the other, and I think more of an impact study on the long-term planning of the traffic is something we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
I think she wants to say something.
I'm going to reserve my comment to a written forum, thank you.
Okay. You know what, let me dial it back a little. My frustration comes more with the school board than, it was a tough rezoning that we went through, and they were really extremely unsympathetic to the town of Farragut and what we have here that's so special, and they had no problem taking part of our section and just moving us. It was very frustrating from having our students pulled away from the continuity, the feeling that you have for being part of this town. And they did not address that at all. They had no sympathy for that or any consideration for that. So
I understand.
that is where I would love to see us, more of our town children in our schools than, but
I understand.
they're Knox County
And
schools.
Knox County being unsympathetic to the town of Farragut does not mean that it makes it right for the town of Farragut to have those same issues with the Knox County School Board. Two wrongs don't make a right. Just because they rezone the school districts, we still have a school issue here. I just wanted to make a comment to make sure it was addressed. That's it. My kids go to Knox County schools. They go to Farragut. I'll have one in the high school next year and one in the middle school. And I love the one with the rounded top that you had put up. That's the one I like. I think it was.
My name is Bill Tuller, and I'm from Cottage Creek. I just have a question on ingress and egress off of Kingston Pike. I thought I heard somebody say it would require a traffic light between Campbell Station Road and the Kroger light. I cannot imagine
No, that.
stopping every 100 yards for a stoplight.
The proposed entrance to this thing is at the Kroger, that stoplight there.
At that stoplight? Okay, I thought it was, we were going to get another stoplight.
Well, it is possible. This entrance that is on Kingston Pike is where the right in, it's directly across from the right in if you're going to China Pearl.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it is possible that the traffic generated by this project would warrant an additional stoplight there. Otherwise, if you want to get to the stoplight at Kings Pike, you would have to drive through the Village Vet parking lot to get to their stoplight, which Village Vet may not be real happy with all that traffic going to their parking lot.
But I think the residents of Farragut wouldn't be real happy stopping every 100 yards.
Well, that's all kind of hypothetical at this point.
That's true.
The traffic impact study would look at all of that. And what it would propose would be, logical, and it would have to meet the requirements, the ITE requirements. But it's premature at this point to know. I'm pretty confident there would be a traffic signal at the high school entrance. I'm almost positive that would be the case. I'm not sure about Kingston Pike.
And we're really trying to make the high school entrance a more dominant entrance in and out.
What I really like to focus on are kind of the three things that we're talking about tonight that are specific to the TCD, which is the town center district. And there's a couple of areas in basically the corridor of Kingston Pike between Concord Road and Campbell Station Road, going all the way over to Mayor Ford's property that's part of this TCD district. And what we're trying to do is philosophically determine is some of the things that we're talking about tonight, the parking requirement, the 4 versus 5 stories, and then another thing that Mr. Allen wanted to talk about that has to do with signage. And we'd really like to talk about those items instead of getting into the real nitty-gritty of a particular project that he really hasn't done all the engineering on and doesn't have all the facts for us to digest tonight. So again, what I'd like to do is, if anybody has any thoughts, I think we have some consensus on the parking requirements, but if anybody has any thoughts on the 5 versus 4 story, we definitely like to hear that, because that is something that is probably critical in making the project work or not work for Mr. Allen.
I don't think having more is better. And that entrance,
If you could please come to the microphone, I'm sorry. We can't hear you we can't see you or hear you on the television.
Hello.
You're on TV. Yeah, smile.
Young Bradley, Cottage Creek. Having more is not necessarily a better thing. I mean, the reason I moved here 4 years ago after I retired from the Army is because it's a small town. I didn't really want big 4, 5, 6-story buildings. I came because of the small buildings. I love the fact that I can drive down Kingston Pike and not see billboards. I love the fact that everything is short, that I can see over. I can see the mountains. I can see everything around here. I don't relish the idea of very high buildings. You can say, well, you know, it's hard to tell if it's 4 or 5 story, but the fact is, if it's 5 stories, you will get at least 10 feet more, and you will see less of the horizon. I don't want more. I want less. And that entrance to the high school exit over there that you have, that gets packed every morning. I have to wait in line to get through. I can't imagine another group of people trying to come out of there. No matter what you think about it, the ingress, egress on either side is a nightmare. And I just don't think I don't think having more is better. In this case, more is bad. Less is better.
I'm going to say, I'm not a big fan of the 5-story. We extended, it took us a lot to come to grips with going to 4 stories. I'm not a big fan of moving to 5.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that with the R6, and we looked at a lot of 3 versus 4, 2, 3, 4-story apartment buildings, and we felt generally like there was a pretty significant difference.
In fact, there was one over at Hardin Valley we looked at that was 5 stories, and we immediately said, whoa, it's pretty big.
Like as the guy mentioned earlier, I think if you modified the parking ratio, but you didn't change the height, that would allow for less footprint on the ground and more open space and more of a tie-in with the floodplain and the outdoor classroom. I mean, that from my perspective would be a better marketing design for this project, because I think you got a real amenity there with the floodplain and the outdoor classroom, and they should be capitalized on. I think you've got probably a little bit too much of a footprint on this layout, in my opinion.
I agree with Louise on the 5-story.
Yeah, Mark, I think that, been out and looking at it, try to visualize what it looks like. When you get to 5 stories, it looks like pretty much overkill.
Well, this is still just discussion.
Right.
And we've got 2 more items of just discussion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, right?
And we will have to take a break at 9 o'clock to change tapes, so sorry.
We still have a little bit of signage that Ms. Allen wanted us to discuss.
And it sounds like you all are okay with doing something with the parking, but maybe not the height. Is that what I'm hearing? The signage, the staff is also supportive of what Mr. Allen is requesting, I think, in theory. The way the design requirements are structured, you can have a up to 12 square foot wall sign or a perpendicular, sign, but not both. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to have both. They're both relatively small, and maybe even revisit the sign area allocation to where it's, more, have more signage allocated, but still, consistent and compatible with the design. I think the biggest thing from my perspective is that all the signage has a consistency and a compatibility, a flow to it, and it's not kind of a hodgepodge of all kinds of different styles and colors and illumination and things that can kind of oftentimes detract from an otherwise very, attractive project. Something like what you've done in Renaissance, I think, is excellent, because it's, there's a consistency there. It's consistent with the building and the design, and it's very, very attractive. But certainly I'm open at the staff level to allow for more signage opportunity in the town center district.
If Mr. Allen were able to use the 1-to-1 ratio and be able to allocate it, whether he wants to do a wall-mounted or a vertical-mounted, and there's probably a good name for a vertical-mounted sign, we're just not coming up with it tonight, but still stay under that 1-to-1, which is 1 square foot per lineal foot of frontage. I wonder what the ramifications of that would be to allow him the flexibility. That way, if somebody wanted two small signs, they could have two small signs.
How does this extend into the other parts of town center district? Are you seeing
Well,
that?
this would apply to anything that would be in the town center district, like the height and the parking. We need to think about it comprehensively, and it wouldn't just be specific to his project. But as you know, in the recently adopted design standards, there's some language in there, visuals that deal with town center type developments and signage. And again, what my end result would be that the sign is proportional. It doesn't look like it's overwhelming to the space, but that it's also consistent material-wise, generally color-wise, style, illuminations, where it's, it doesn't have to be identical, but it does have kind of a flow to it, kind of a consistency to it that each sign is, you don't look across a building and there's one sign that just is totally out of place and really detracts from the appearance.
Why do you want two signs on the front of a space?
Well, if you had a door and two windows, you might have them in each window. The goal is to attract people that are national type tenants, and they will not go with a 12 square feet. That's a very small sign. That's a 2x6 sign. That's not very visible. Even though this is mainly a pedestrian type situation, it's still, to attract those people, they have certain requirements that they need a bigger sign or more signage.
I think kind of the idea between the vertical sign and the wall sign is, the wall sign, you can see it when you're in your car in the parking lot. The vertical sign is if you're walking down the sidewalk. In an effort to keep from doing this, when you look up on the wall, you actually would have a vertical sign. So I kind of like the idea of doing, or at least making you eligible for both, coming up with a ratio that works and that's proportional to the buildings, I think would be important. And whether the 1-to-1 ratio is appropriate, I don't know, but I kind of tend to think that that's a ratio that we've used at Renaissance, and it's worked pretty good, albeit our buildings are smaller.
You all have a consistent size in Renaissance. They're all 18 square feet, I believe. No matter
They are.
what,
They're 2
no
by
matter
9.
how much.
Yeah, that
furniture.
were 9 by 2. That's correct.
Yeah. How do the rest of y'all feel about the signage? Does that seem like something?
I am not for more signs.
Okay.
Stick with the 1-on-1.
Well, the 1-to-1 would be increasing.
That would be increasing.
What we're allowing today in the TCD. So, but now 1-to-1 is what we use in the C-1 zoning district. But TCD, we were trying to do something that, the idea behind the TCD is we didn't want it to look, to the town center district, we didn't want it to look like a strip mall. And so we reduced the size of the signage allocations to try to be something that was more typical of what you would see in a downtown, maybe an historic downtown or a town center that wasn't just a giant wall sign. So it was important that we reduce that. So that's where we came up with the 12 square feet. If a typical shop bay is 20 to 25 square feet, under a C1 zoning, you would be eligible for 20 to 25 square feet versus 12 square feet. Did I say square feet of frontage or lineal feet of frontage? I meant lineal feet of frontage. So if a retail bay is typically 25 feet of frontage measured from the left side to the right side, then you would be eligible for 25 square feet of sign. And if that's too much in the TCD, we need to discuss it.
I think that, personally, I think it would be a little too much in the TCD. Not in C1 regular, but I think that might be a little too much. But I certainly think 12 square feet probably is something that I would support going bigger than that. I mean, it's.
Okay, I'm going to ask it because I'm just not seeing it. What is the difference between a perpendicular wall sign and a regular building mounted wall sign?
Perpendicular wall sign, it protrudes from the building.
Okay.
Over the pedestrian way.
Okay.
So you see it if you're traveling on the sidewalk.
Okay.
Kind of like this.
Is actually.
A perpendicular sign would be mounted on the building.
So
like
as I'm
this,
walking, I can see all the
and
different.
the wall sign would be mounted like that.
Okay.
That's right.
That's
yeah.
a lot of signage. So in this request, you're asking for, say you have 5 commercial buildings that they.
What's going on, Ryan? How are you?
Please resume your seats and let's get on with this session, please.
Hope it's not another midnighter.
Yeah. Oh. Does anybody on the commission have any further desires or any further comments on these issues?
Does the applicant feel like that you have some guidance about the direction that at least this commission is leaning?
Yeah, but at the next meeting, would I come up for the zoning part, or is it?
Well, probably land use plan. You could probably run land use and zoning concurrently, Mark.
It won't be another discussion deal, right? It'll be,
Yep, Mark.
Yeah, it's a matter of whether we could get it put together or not. I mean, I can't promise you anything, but I need a direction, which I think it's parking we can manipulate, the height, no, signage, yes, and try to figure out. I don't know if we'll have it ready as far as ordinance
That would not
amendments.
slow down his land use plan amendment.
Yeah, he could go ahead and
Go and do the land
request
use plan amendment.
to do the land use plan amendment, but until you modify the town center district text, you may or may not want to, I mean, you could.
We could rezone with the TCD and then work through the amendments. The risk on your part is if you don't get the amendments that you want.
well, I mean, the one on the parking is critical,
Right.
and that is a critical number.
The concept plan would need to be modified to reflect that, because I would imagine that there would be less footprint on this tract by the parking being lessened significantly. So that would be a plus, I think.
Yeah, what you might do, you might take those two buildings that are against the school and you put them on the ground instead of having parking underneath them. I don't know if it changes the footprint that much.
I think you know that from our comments on the concept plan, we'd like to see as much of the south or the west end of the property, protected and used as kind of a natural amenity for this project. So anything you could do to help in that regard would be
one other thing was moving the buffer on the high school part to 20 feet.
Yes.
Is that a variance would ask
That would
for?
have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a request. And that could be done. But we would need to update the concept plan, I think, first per this discussion, because we didn't really know what to do with it, because there were some things up in the air about that would affect the footprint, like the height and how the parking is allocated. So now that we know kind of the direction, then, I think your concept plan is going to need to be modified accordingly, and then we can take it, however we want to take it from that point.
Well, would I be coming to the next meeting, or would I wait till the ordinance were redrawn and come to the next
We can
meeting?
probably put something together for, I don't know if it'll be ready for a vote, but just to run by the commission on some draft wording of modifications to the town center district that reflects the discussion tonight. And then you could go ahead and get the land use plan amendment approved if you want to. And then we could talk about the ordinance amendment hopefully at the next meeting. There's going to be a lot of items on the next agenda, including probably the continental rezoning. So it's been a crazy past few months at the planning commission level. That's not your fault, and I apologize for that, but it does take a lot of time to try to work through these kind of ordinance modifications and make sure that we do them right, and we think about it comprehensively with any property that could be a town center district designation.
The traffic study will have to be done before we
Yeah.
can rezone, correct?
Yeah, the traffic study would have to be done, so we know and we'd have to have time to analyze it prior to any action taken on the rezoning request.
Greg, you could go and do your land use plan next month if you wanted to do that, and we'd take that to a
And
vote.
we'll try to work up some language and, you know, run it by you all and see where we're at. Now, we may or may not be ready for action on that next month. I don't want to promise you something that I can't deliver.
Well, even if we left the TCD alone, he would still be eligible to hear that. I guess what I'm saying is that that's one box he could check off trying to move forward.
Yeah.
Just one question. What did you say about the buffer next to the school?
We're reducing it
Why would you do that?
because it was Mark's suggestion to get the property away from the tree line along the creek.
They increased the buffer on the other side.
Yeah, we increased the buffer on the other side.
I think when we contemplated those buffers, we were thinking about town centers being next to residential areas. This one's a little bit different. It's next to the football field and probably the softball field. So really, the buffer protects more your residents than it does folks at the school. But those are things that we all need to think about as we're talking about this buffer.
Right.
Well, it's also to prevent encroachment on the trees and so forth that are on the Environment Park, on the outdoor classroom, which his latest proposal works.
Yeah, that's why we moved it. We moved it to get more buffer on that side.
Yeah. Okay, I hope you have enough guidance.
Okay.
Let's move on then to item number 13. It's discussion on a request to amend the 2012 Comprehensive Land Use Plan for Parcel 44, Tax Map 152, located at 430 Virtue Road, 87.1 acres, from medium-density residential to open space cluster residential. Ryan Testerman, applicant.
This particular request is just talking about the comprehensive land use plan. Basically, the property is the Harville property off of Virtue Road, and to the north is Sugarwood, and then to the south is Kingsgate. It has some really significant environmental characteristics. The Little Turkey Creek floodplain is very substantial through the western portion of the property there along Virtue Road, and then the south side of the property that backs up to Kingsgate is very steeply sloped and heavily wooded. In the comprehensive land use plan, that property was specified as medium-density residential. The thought was that it, might be a good candidate for a higher density, kind of a clustered development that would capitalize on the environmental characteristics of the property. But as you know, we've had a lot of interest in multifamily. We've got one project that it's already had a site plan approval north of the interstate, another one that's requested for rezoning. Then we've got what may occur in the town center district. So the thought of having another parcel designated for medium density residential, given the changes that have occurred since the plan was updated in December 2012, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for that to stay as medium-density residential. So they're requesting to change the comprehensive plan for that property to an open space cluster residential, which reflects the zoning district that they're requesting for the rezoning. That'll be the next item on the agenda. The staff feels that, given the environmental characteristics that I noted earlier, that the open space residential is the ideal zoning district for this piece of property. It would allow them to use the undevelopable portion of the property toward their density, but then it would, allow for more flexibility to be able to stay out of the floodplain and off those steep slopes and incorporate those into open space. This particular property may very well end up being over 40% open space with all of its, limitations or characteristics. It's very possible that can be the case. So we feel that the requested amendment to the comprehensive plan is very reasonable, and we would certainly, although this is just a workshop discussion, we would certainly support that request. That, of course, would be, conditioned on the Virtue Road, and this also relates to the rezoning. Doesn't meet the town's standards for a major collector. Similar to Everett Road that I mentioned earlier, it doesn't meet our standards, but we do have a plan in place there, and we're actually getting ready to improve that road. We don't have that in place for this road. So the road would have to be, brought up to the standards that we require in our subdivision regulations for, a major collector street, and including pedestrian facilities along the frontage. And that, although we feel the comprehensive plan request, amendment request is a good one, the road is going to have to be dealt with as part of the development of this property. And that would affect also, of course, the next item, the rezoning. That's kind of an introduction to this. I don't know if anybody has, I think Mr. Testerman is here. If you have any questions of him.
Comments, please.
Hi, I'm Mary Bland. I live at 433 Grinstead, which is directly on the south side of the property in question. I thank you. I was unable to see that. So there's the
That's
property
Yep.
in question. So I've noticed that on the agenda, on the application, on the other documents, that some places it says open space cluster residential, some places it says open space residential, some is medium density resident. Pick a document. I haven't found anything that's consistent with what this is going to be rezoned as.
Well, the current designation on the land use plan is medium density residential.
Okay.
6 to 12 units per acre.
Okay.
The requested change is to a land use designation of open space cluster. None of those are zoning districts. Those are land use designations.
Right, correct.
Then when you look at the land use designation, for the open space cluster, the zoning district that would best correspond to that is the open space residential overlay, which is what they're requesting on as part of their rezoning, which would be consistent with their request involving the comprehensive plan update.
Okay.
So there's two different types of things going on. You got the comprehensive plan map that needs to be changed if they want to do this project, and then the property itself, which is mostly currently zoned agriculture, would have to be rezoned to the R1 OSR to enable them to do the project that they're wanting to do.
What is you said that on the medium density residential that it's 6 to 12 per acre. What is the open space residential? What is that?
Generally, that's going to be around, 2 units per acre.
Okay. Okay,
It's,
and that's what they're
the
asking
density
for.
is based on the R1 base zoning, which is 20,000 square foot lot.
Okay,
So you take that, as I mentioned earlier with the previous item, you take the the total land area, multiply that by 43,560. How much is in an acre, square feet in an acre, and then divide that by 20,000. That tells you the maximum number of lots you could theoretically have on this property.
right.
And then you've got a lot of flexibility in how you arrange those lots on the
Right.
property.
No, that's fine. I mean, I understand what open space cluster is. I just didn't know the average. I didn't know what the density was in the 2 per acre versus 6 or 12
Their
per acre.
request is a much, much lower density than what it's
Right.
currently shown as
Great.
on the land use
Okay,
plan.
that's what I was wanting to know. And I didn't see in any of the documents, I'm sure this is probably on the next one and not this one, I didn't see anything either that was mailed to me or online of an idea of what this is going to look like.
I haven't seen that either.
They haven't, so they'll still have to come back.
I think they're in the
and-
early stages. Mr. Tesserman can speak to that if he wants to, but I don't think they've gotten far enough. They want to see, whether the plan can be updated and the property rezoned and the road issue
Okay.
dealt with.
I
and
had
those kinds of
called,
things.
I had called his office to ask the questions just to prevent all this. I'm sure that someone in there could have, and they wouldn't talk with me, so that's all I have. Thank you.
I'm Charles Falk. I live at 446 Sugarwood Drive. And first of all, I'd like to commend Dr. Harville and Mrs. Harville for the years that they've kept this area pristine. And when I moved here from another state, the promise the realtor made was that this property would always be maintained this way. It was even in the will. Now, I don't know if that was true or it was the realtor that gave me a lot, but I bought the house based on that. And I'm not going to talk about the technical parts or the law. What I want to talk about is what is the purpose of zoning? It's to protect landowners. Now, this house, this development, I have a beautiful view of the meadow and the woods right beside it. I know all the deer that come out and roam around the meadow, the turkeys and things. If I'm looking over roofs and bulldozers and streets, my property value is going to drop. Now, I'm not a wealthy guy, but I bought a house, put my money into the house because I loved that area. And I just appeal to anyone that is willing to listen that we ought to protect that land. And I just appeal to whoever's going to make decisions here to not allow the property values to be destroyed. I can still picture the Confederate soldiers coming down off the hill over Bridgemore down into the meadow, and that's where they stood when they faced the Union Army at the other side. How much land do we need? I agree with people that say we don't need a whole lot more people moving in here and crowding up the roads anymore. When I moved here in 2005, well, the next year, 2006, there was an article in the paper that said this was the best place to live in the whole South. It wasn't because I moved here, but I do think that it was a good thing, and I'd hope I heard lately that we're down to 3 or 4, we're not first anymore. But I just would like to appeal to the fact that we would like to see that land stay the way it is. And it's very valuable to me to have that. Thank you.
I'm Judith, excuse me, Judith Harville, and my husband and I own 430 Virtue Road, 87.1 acres. We bought the land in the 60s. We bought it to build a house and raise our family, which we did, and we've enjoyed it and loved it. We didn't buy it for speculation or to do anything but retain the property. Our children are gone. It's 2015. The highest and best use for that land, it's the only, you can look on the map there. We are surrounded by homes. We're surrounded by Sugarwood. That was the other part of the farm that we bought. They kept that as a farm and then sold it later. And then Sugarwood's behind us. Kingsgate's on the other side. So the highest and best use for that property is residential. We cannot, I'd love to, I'm not Donald Trump, I'm not a Rockefeller, but I really cannot afford to maintain that property for people to watch the deer and the turkeys. I love it too. I love, pretty soon they're going to be taking hay out and putting I love to see the hay in the fields. When we had cattle on it, I loved to see the cattle on it. But I can't, those days are gone. We can't do that anymore. So what will be there, and Mr. Testerman can speak to it better than I can, but I know his developments. I'm very familiar with them. It certainly would not devalue anyone's property. It would be a highly increase in value to have what he would put there. If you go to Whittington Creek, you know how nice the golf course is across the road. They own that. If you go to Ainsley Woods, down Nubbins Ridge, you'll see it. If you go to Whispering Woods, you'll see it. So there are beautiful, beautiful areas that he has in mind for that. So thank you for your time, and I hope you will see it my way. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. And believe it or not, we understand that property owners have property rights.
I'm Brian Testerman, 8601 Dunair Drive. To simplify this real quick we've already had 2 or 3 meetings with the gentleman here in Farragut, and they were supposed to come up with an estimate on this road out there, Virtue Road, and I've never heard a word yet. Not one word have I heard about it. I went to a meeting the other day. The guy that was supposed to be there, he was out of town on vacation. They were going to call me the following Monday. I still hadn't heard from him. So, in other words, I hadn't heard a word from anybody. So, in other words, certain things y'all don't like. Well, I didn't much like that either, not to be somebody get back with me on something. So, in other words, we're talking about a piece of property that we don't even know what's going to be developed anyway, by me. I mean, that road is a big deal. And, I'm not in the road building business myself. I'm a builder, home builder. And, he could speak to the road. I believe he was there. Mm-hmm. And I haven't heard a word about that. And that's been a month.
Who did you expect to talk to?
What was that guy's name, Mark?
Well,
the city engineer, whatever I can't call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did put together a proposal, and we're still, looking at it and going through it, and that's why.
Well, I think a month ought to be adequate to come up with an estimate. I mean, nobody's holding you to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been over a month, and 2 or 3 different meetings, and it's, I think I deserve the same respect as y'all want from me. In other words, I think that works both ways. And, in other words, I sit here and listen to y'all, what you demand out of other people. Well, you ought to do the same, I think.
Mr. Testerman, in all due respect, I don't think it's an easy calculation to determine what the cost to improve that road is.
Well, it's not that hard, sir. I can promise you that. I mean, it can be done within, a matter of a week or so.
We've tried to shotgun approach these road improvements before, and our numbers have been significantly off. We just want it to be fair.
Well, I understand that, but I think a month, for an estimate it's a reasonable period of time.
We don't want to give you a number that would be misleading to you, and we want to make sure whatever we give you is something that's been well thought through. And when we, so that, we're clear on it, you're clear on it, and we're not misleading you or there's some confusion about it. What we did mention at the staff developer meeting is that the frontage would have to be improved as part of your development.
I don't understand. That certainly is not what we started out That was not what we started out with. It was going to be a shared deal. That's what everybody said. And then we go to the last meeting, and all at once, since there was 1,340 foot that I owned, they wanted me to develop that with no share. And 500 foot would share. Well, that's not, I don't think that's exactly what I call a shared deal.
Well, that's
nobody else, I mean, I'm not going, I mean, that's not right. If we're going to share, we're going to share.
Well, I think I'd be happy to set up a meeting with the town engineer, and we could talk through some of these things and see what.
Well, we've had 2 of them meetings.
Yeah, he wasn't at that one, though, if you remember.
Yeah, I understand, but he was at the first one. And we were going, you know, in other words, we were going to go through, we went through everything then, and we were going to have get back in touch with Mr. Testerman. That was 4 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
And I never heard another word. I mean, you know, it's not fair to Ms. Harwell, who it's not fair to. I mean, she needs to know whether I'm going to buy her property or whether I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah, I understand.
They want to know.
Yeah.
Well.
And you know,
we'll
I just think what's fair is fair.
We'll get on with it, and you'll be involved.
Well, kind of explain to me what that means now, so I'll kind of know what that means.
Make it a priority.
Okay.
Mr. Testman, I can assure you, we're not going to ask anything of you that we haven't asked of other developers in these road share projects. Matter of fact, there's one in this room right now that's paid his fair share over the years of many road improvement projects that didn't even front his property. So this is a complex issue. I'm sure everybody has a lot of heartburn over this, but this is consistent with what we've done in the past.
I'm not so sure that it is. In other words, y'all do commercial work every day, and none of you guys share if anything.
No, we pay more for property on commercial property.
That doesn't make any difference. That doesn't help. That doesn't solve the road problems.
Yeah. If you're building on Kings Pike, you're already on a publicly improved road.
I'm on an improved road too. Virtue Road's an improved road.
I
mean, seriously, you got to be fair now.
Well, we are going to be fair. I can promise you that.
I mean,
we'll be absolutely consistent with what we've done in the past.
Well, what is that? What have you done in the past? So I understand.
We have expected the developers to pay their fair share of road improvements when the
roads
are substandard.
What is the fair share?
Well, it's a complicated calculation that has to do with how many trips per day you're going to generate on that road.
And everybody's going to pay the same. Is that correct?
No, not everybody pays the same.
Why not?
But I can assure you they pay generally the same per unit. But some developments that are smaller developments, they're going to pay less than a large development. Yours is going to be a large development. You're going to have a lot of houses. You're going to generate a lot of traffic on Virtue Road.
There's a lot of traffic already on Virtue Road.
Yes, sir, there is.
Sugarwood?
Oh, I'm completely aware of it. Yes, sir.
Your all's development right down the street?
Yes, sir. That was zoned R1 for many, many years before I
and
bought it.
You didn't pay a penny on the road?
It was already zoned R1.
That doesn't make any difference.
Well, sure it does.
No, it doesn't. Everybody, if we're going to share in the roads, everybody ought to share equally.
Mr. Testerman, this argument can go on forever.
Let's hear from David Smoke behind you.
Pardon?
Let me shed a little light on this, Mr. Testerman. Hello, David Smoke, Town Administrator. We did meet with Mr. Testerman probably about a month ago, 3 weeks as he said, and then he did have another meeting with Mr. Shipley. We have been working on a calculation to come up with, because this is a very complicated issue of figuring out how many cars are out there now, how many cars is he going to put on the streets whenever he puts his development in. Obviously, we don't know exactly the number of units yet that he's looking at doing, and that may vary depending on that. But certainly there's the road frontage that he's going to be in front of, and also what the off-site improvements may have to be to get the road up to our standard, which it is not right now. So I think we can get all that information to Mr. Testerman by next week. I think the main thing for tonight's meeting and for the discussion is to figure out from the Planning Commission just what information you need in order to make your decision as well regarding these road improvements, if you think we need to make them or not make them. So that's kind of the direction that we're heading in right now. Certainly we would propose that we certainly need to make those improvements at some point in time. There is some more developable land up and down Virtue Road depending on how it develops in the future. But certainly from this point going north is the area that we're focusing on right now, from this property up to toward Kingston Pike.
Well, the big problems, the big issue about all of this new development is roads, and frankly, it comes down to who's going to pay what for what, and we haven't resolved that yet.
roads are so different in each area depending on how much density you're putting in, how bad a shape the road is now versus another one. And so that's why we look at them on a case-by-case basis, and that's why it takes time to actually go through. We're about to start a study, hopefully, in the next month or so that's going to really give us a better feel for and having a fair approach for everybody in town. But right now, this is where we're at, and we're trying to do the best we can with it.
Yeah, I know that. Like, the Bob Evans Road is now down to just dirt, no pavement in places.
There's a few challenges out there, and we're working on them. We have limited resources, so we're trying to do the ones we can, and we've got a big one on Everett Road that we're going to start here in the next month, and it's the largest project, money-wise, we've ever done, the town of Farragut, at $3.5 million, so that's a big chunk out of our budget.
Back to the land use plan, I think the property's an excellent candidate for the open space residential. I think it's actually a better suited than the medium density that we had it before. So with that being said, I definitely support the R1 OSR is a good overlay in the land use plan as well as the zoning district that we're going to be dealing with this. The road improvements are another issue that we're going to have to deal with. Obviously, as most of you can see, it's contentious and it's complicated and it's expensive. It's expensive for the developer and it's expensive for the taxpayer. And we try to get the town officials as well as the town attorney to come up with a plan that's as fair as possible, and sometimes it's challenging. Matter of fact, every time it's been challenging. So anyway, we're digging into some things that you guys probably didn't think we were going to dig into tonight, but I suspected that this was going to be a big issue because when a developer has to pay for a road that's not necessarily even fronting his property, he doesn't like it, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't like it either. But again, it's consistent with what we've done in the past, and we're trying to come up with something that's fair to the developer, fair to the future residents, and fair to the taxpayers of Farragut.
How many of those acres are zoned agriculture and how many are residential out of that 87?
I think the bulk of it is agricultural.
Or flood. So it's not really going
Well, and there is some floodplain in there, but.
So it's not really going from medium density, it's going from agriculture.
Well, what's a little complicated is we're dealing with two independent issues tonight. We have a guiding map that we use for everything that is called the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. And before we can do any kind of rezoning, we have to make sure it's compatible with the land use plan. And if it's not compatible with the land use plan, we have to amend the land use plan before we can jump into zoning. That's why there's two discussion items tonight. One is to amend the land use plan, and if that is amended favorably, then you can go forth and amend the zoning, which would be, i.e., we'd call it rezoning. So so it's a little bit difficult when we're talking about these two things that are somewhat similar in nature. The land use plan is designed from a big 10,000-foot view. The zoning is very specific to property lines, whereas the land use plan is not. Land use plan kind of squiggles around and gerrymanders in different directions. But nevertheless, with both the land use plan, I think it's an excellent candidate for the R1. Probably the OSR is a good thing. And then the same thing with the zoning. The big issue that we're going to have to deal with is the road improvements.
I think we probably have agreement that this proposed change to the land use plan and zoning is applicable to this piece of land as long as we can solve their other problem, which is the road.
I think what we all have to put in perspective sometimes, those of us that live in neighborhoods, and I've lived in a lot of neighborhoods here in the town. I've lived in Village Green and Vista and Fox Run, Cottage Creek, and what we all keep remember is our neighborhoods were farms once as well. And so we can't just say just because we had a farm behind us, we always want that farmer to be there. We have to look out for everybody's interest, and as much as we would like to see the deer and the turkeys, what Mr. Testerman said, it's not necessarily fair to a farm-owning family to say, well, you just can't develop your farm because we don't want to look at houses. The reality is that's where most of us live, is in neighborhoods that used to be farms. However, there's a lot of other things that go along with creating a subdivision, and we're dealing with a big one tonight that has to do with, again, the road improvements. As a matter of fact, road improvements has been a common denominator for us the past few months because as the developers are scurrying trying to find projects to build because there is demand for housing, they're looking at properties that are on substandard roads, and these substandard roads require improvements, and who's going to pay for those improvements? is a challenging ratio of trying to determine what's fair. So again, I apologize for being long-winded, and I know Mr. Testman and I may not necessarily see eye to eye. I do understand. I have been in his shoes. But again, for me, being on this planning commission, I want to be fair and consistent with what we've done in the past. One of the things that the mayor asked me years ago when he asked me to be on the planning commission is I want a level playing field for everybody, and what we're asking is a level playing field. It may feel somewhat unfair when you got to write a big check, but it is the way we've done things. You can ask Mr. Money in the back. He's written some of those big checks with the town of Farragut of trying to figure out how to do off-site road improvements. And so this is not something new that we're just deciding to do tonight. Are we ready to go to the next item, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, let's go ahead to the next item. That takes both care of both 13 and 14. Okay, 15 is a discussion of amendments to the text of the Farragut zoning ordinance as they relate to the definitions of elderly housing, assisted living, nursing homes, and land use and parking space allocations of such lands. Peter Falk, Autumn Care, was applicant that is requesting this.
Can you guys have your conversations outside, please? We can't hear. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's outside. Okay, and on this issue, it's on our documents or ordinances were somewhat they're not clear on the definitions of these items, and this is a discussion of how to define what elderly housing means, what assisted housing means. I think we know what nursing homes mean, but elderly housing is maybe a overall term that covers all these other things. But the way our current ordinance are written, they're just not clear. They just need to be wordsmithed a bit to make sure we are on the same page. Mark?
Yeah, I want just to kind of, this is something that really we've needed to clean up for a while, in my opinion, is these terminology that we have in our zoning ordinance. We have a definition for elderly housing, and we have one for nursing homes. As it's treated in our zoning ordinance, elderly housing is synonymous with assisted living. The way it's defined, the way its characteristics. So that needs to really just be added specifically in the text of the ordinance so that it's very clear what we're talking about. Because to me, if you see elderly housing, I've looked at other communities' ordinances, and it's somewhat misleading. An assisted living facility is one where people live there that are really no longer can live safely by themselves. They do have, there's a kitchen facility, they have services. They're not to the level of care where they have to have, skilled nursing 24 hours a day. But it's basically people that are transitioning from a completely independent lifestyle to potentially a nursing home setting. So that, I think, needs to be clarified in the ordinance, just to spell out that in the context and the application of our zoning ordinance, elderly housing is the same as assisted living. Then there's also the matter of lot sizes. And this relates to this item because related to the next item, in order to try to rezone the property to something that would allow for an assisted living facility. It's currently zoned residential, R2. There's 3 zoning districts that allow for assisted living. There's commercial, there's planned commercial, and then there's the R6, which is the multifamily. As you all probably know, this town has consistently wanted the corridor from the elementary school to to Jamestown Boulevard as a no commercial section of town, kind of an entranceway into the town. So what you see in that section is pretty much
civic institutional type of uses. You see the park, you've got a library, church, schools, those kinds of things. In order to rezone it to R6, to allow for an assisted living facility, the R6 zoning district has a 5-acre minimum lot size. This property is 4.5 acres. When we updated the R6 zoning district a few months ago, we did talk about the land area. As you may remember, there used to be a 15-acre maximum for multifamily, and there's always been the 5-acre minimum. The thought process was we got rid of the maximum land area, but we kept the 5-acre minimum because the feeling was that a very small multifamily project wouldn't have enough residents in there to maintain a high level of maintenance for the facility. In general, you have to have probably upwards of 200 units for a multifamily facility to really sustain itself over time. So we kept that acreage minimum in the R6 zoning district. We didn't really talk about elderly housing or nursing home projects in land area. And what I think needs to be clarified in the ordinance is whether that 5-acre land area would apply to those specific types of developments. Or if any property that's to be rezoned to R6 just simply has to be 5 acres, and that's fine if that's what the feeling is. But that just is something that I needed to get some feedback and clarification from you all on. I don't personally think the intent was to establish a 5-acre minimum lot size for elderly housing and nursing home, because if you look in the R6 zoning district, when you go to elderly housing, it says as provided for in Chapter 4, and there's a section in Chapter 4 that deals specifically with elderly housing, same way with nursing homes. And a few years ago, in 2009, there used to be a minimum land area size for elderly housing, and that was removed by the Planning Commission and the board, because the feeling was that if a project could meet the parking, the buffering, setbacks, the lot coverage, then the land area would have to be sufficient enough for it to be able to do that, and there was no reason to have the minimum lot size for those type of facilities. So that's the two issues. The terminology, I think, is a pretty simple thing, and then the land area, because they really affect this request. I don't know how you all feel about that, if I've pointed out the issues sufficiently or not.
Months back when we were discussing the proposed assisted living on Grigsby Chapel, Noah, you had proposed perhaps needing a separate elderly housing or assisted living zone.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe that's what we need to do, break that out. I don't know if
We could. I think the town attorney did feel comfortable with earmarking, maybe if that's the right word, but
designating
designating
yeah.
might be a more appropriate word. If we got warm and fuzzy with the R6 to designate specifically for elderly and not for multifamily.
Are we going to keep running into this, though? Do we need to just bite the bullet and just have a elderly
New zoning district? Maybe.
Yes, because we're going to keep on having to designate that on. I don't know how that doesn't seem to me a complicated thing, but if we keep on doing this, it's like a variance. You keep on giving variances. There's a problem with your code, so.
I don't necessarily would want to do this for the applicant, because I don't think that's necessarily fair to the applicant. There's a lot of other issues we got to discuss tonight with this, but nevertheless, I think that might be something we may want to explore if the staff would just be so delighted to put it on their work program.
Fine, yeah.
You can add it in the 3-ring binder of stuff to do in the next year or two.
Ashley's like ready
Yeah,
to take a
I'm
knife
looking
to
for
my
things
eye.
to do, so
You had
that
some
may
boredom,
be-
right?
Good thought, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we have talked about that.
There is a quite a bit of demand for senior living or elderly housing, or what some people call transitional housing, and I think most of you that kind of follows maybe some of the trends and demographics, and you realize that there's a bubble in the population that's growing older. So I mean, I do think there is some further discussion warranted about the senior living and what the difference is between, because I've had to learn what's the difference between a nursing home, assisted living, independent living, and transitional living.
Yeah.
And there is, as you being neighbors, there are differences that you need to be aware of, because there are some that create more traffic and more noise than others.
Yeah.
And so those are important for everybody to understand, so we just can't put a rubber stamp and say, oh, just because you're over 55, you live in there, it's now called senior living, or is even one called active living, and so these are some things that we're going to have to work through. I think this will probably be one of many that's going to come before this Planning Commission over the next couple of years, of projects that are probably similar in scope and size. It seems to be a pretty popular size and total number of units. But I think, I mean, generally speaking, I think that the R5, the 5-acre minimum for R6 was maybe somewhat arbitrary, but we do need to work through this and determine what is appropriate, and then maybe get into some more of the nitty-gritty of this particular location.
Well, aside from all those points, I want to talk about the wisdom of rezoning this particular piece of property. My wife and family came to this place 37 years ago, bought a house in Village Green, backs up to Campbell Station Road. Campbell Station Road then was 2 lanes, 2 narrow lanes, and if you heard a car pass, you were tempted to call the cops. Things have changed, and along the way and early in the town's history, the notion was that because Campbell Station Road would be like the front door to Farragut, there should be some sacred thoughts about it in terms of what we allowed there. Subsequently, there came along a library, a church, a park, schools, and for all these years, that distance between, say, Grigsby Chapel south down to entrance to the high school has been sort of kept sacred. And for that reason, I cannot support a rezoning on that particular piece of property. I think it needs to be residential or something very benign, but it's not the place for anything commercial.
I don't know whether I should follow that or not, quite frankly, because my name is Bill Tuller, and I'm a resident of Cottage Creek. I'm here along with others from our neighborhood, and perhaps even some from Sweetbriar, I'm not sure. But we are adamantly opposed to the rezoning of this property on the issues you brought up and several other issues. This will be a 24/7 facility with security lighting and staff going in and out. In addition to staff, people visiting their relatives, and commercial vehicles delivering linens and food and whatever else is brought into this place. The only way out is going to be exiting onto Heron Road. And if you exit onto Heron Road and turn left towards Campbell Station, whatever vehicle that is in danger of being hit by a Heron Road vehicle coming over a hill and around a blind curve. This is, as you said, the main entry to Farragut. There are no other businesses on this street. There are plenty of commercial properties available in Farragut that could be utilized for this kind of project, and much safer, and I think that should be looked at. The proposed center right now, we understand, is 40 units with hopes to expand to 70 units, meaning they would expand backwards, tear down the old farmhouse, and abut our neighborhood directly. So as a neighborhood, we oppose this rezoning, and I don't know whether anyone else from the neighborhood wants to speak up, but we want to thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ken Chipley, 11602 Gates Mill. I'm in Sweetbriar. And I want to have a little bit of contrary thoughts here. We've been looking at that piece of property. It's been for sale ever since I moved here in 1987. Even before that, I was in the community. And, of course, that was a heron farm. All of our houses were on the heron farm. This is one of the last little pieces left facing Campbell Station. And I'm apprehensive about what's going to be built there. And this is kind of the bird in the hand that has pretty low impact. He mentioned a few people coming and going. There's got a staff of 6 or 8 people during the day, another 8 or 10 at night, or vice versa. I can't remember what. It's a fairly low impact on the traffic. He's going to have a problem getting the driveway in and making it safe to, getting off Heron Road. But I don't see, I wish I could have your vision of something else that's going to be there that's going to have less impact. If we develop at R2 at about 4 units per acre, you're looking at 12, 16 houses in there. That's 2 houses per family. That's 32 cars, give or take. That's going to be a lot more impact than what they're talking about here. I've been by his Canton Hollow facility over there. They got one down at Canton Hollow right behind the AutoZone place. Hey, there's 6, 8 cars in there on any given day. I went by there one Sunday afternoon, there was 12. That seems to be pretty low numbers. And I'm more concerned about the traffic coming out on Heron Road than anything else. If we develop this R2 right now, we're going to have a lot more cars than that. There's a lot of R2 development that could look, and I'm not going to say anything about those 2 little houses they put there at the old Cruise place, but there could be a lot more of those prefab houses go in on an R2 development. So I'm apprehensive about it, but this is the bird in the hand, and I have no concept about anything in the future that could be a less impact. So that's where I am. I'm kind of apprehensive about it, but yeah, it's something that we got. So thank you.
Peter Falk, Linksview Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee. I appreciate those comments. I didn't pay him compensation or anything. I don't know this gentleman, but I do appreciate that. A lot of the things he said is accurate. It's not going to be 5 stories. We're not going to be taking up any more space in the school system. We're not going to add any more traffic lights. And there is not going to be any plans for expansion. The largest facility that I've ever constructed is 42 apartments. And I could even make this one less. I think 36 is probably the least I could go. Let me see if I can reference some of my notes to confirm some of the points that this gentleman made. We would only use about 2 plus or minus acres of the 4.5, which leaves a lot of green and open space. Our Canton Hollow Road facility is the only 2-story building I've ever built, so it's only going to be 1 story. Our Carnes facility is probably the most similar design that we would do for that property. I'm the developer, contractor, and operator of my facilities. So I have a lot of flexibility in what I can do here. And I'm willing to work with the neighbors on the design. I did meet with the HOAs, except for I couldn't find anybody from Cottage Creek a couple of months ago. And I had a couple people approach me, well, could we take this project and add more stonework? Could we orient it? I think Mark mentioned have one of the wings face Campbell Station where it's a low profile. You're not going to see the entrance. The parking would be a lower impact, visual impact. I think there's 50-foot buffers for this type of project. Would be a lot of green screening for my residents, as well as the visual impact on Campbell Station and on Heron Road. He mentioned the house with the fence. I think somebody would prefer another large 5-story single mansion there. I'm not sure that would be the best looking thing on that corner. The property is owned by Mr. Heron, or the Heron family. There's 3 owners actually. They're all elderly, they're all out of town. He called me specifically because he's familiar with my projects and the quality developments. And he made the comment that he was very particular about who he sold the Heron property to for Cottage Creek type and Sweetbriar. He's had offers to have all kinds of things built there. I think he sent me a list. I mean, doctor's offices, veterinarians, and retail, and therapy centers, and tons of different things. But this would be a low impact. Our day shift would have between 8 to 10 employees. Our night shift has 2 or 3. Our shift changes. We have 12-hour shifts. It'll be 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., which are not really heavy traffic areas as far as the schools. They have to be at work clocked in by 7, so they're arriving at 6:30, 6:45, so not many people are out of their house by then. The parking, I think Mark had mentioned about the parking spaces, is a little bit different for the different levels of senior housing. I think that's one of the clarifications that we had discussed in some of the earlier meetings. Are you recommending 0.75 spaces per?
That's what the current requirement is 0.75.
So that would be about 30 parking spaces, and that should be more than sufficient. My Canton Hollow Road is a 42 apartment facility, and we have 28 spaces.
How many of your residents drive?
At Canton Hollow, 2. Out of 42.
This is not a medical care facility. You don't offer any kind of.
We do have a medical director. We do have a nurse on staff.
Okay.
And the trend has been that the people for assisted living are less and less ambulatory, have more need for assistance with the activities of daily living. I think we're seeing the transition of people in the spectrum of care that used to be intermediate care in the nursing homes are now in the assisted livings. And that's basically because the state changed the rules for admission to nursing homes, because our costs are about half the cost of a nursing home. That's another thing that we would offer as service to the community, and that's kind of what we specialize in. This would be the 6th assisted living facility I've built in Knox County, the 9th overall. I'm building 2 other ones out of Knox County, but it makes a really nice transition between heavy traffic and commercial and a residential. Canton Hollow is a good example. We're right behind the AutoZone, right across the street from the games and things, and there's a neighborhood right behind us. Somebody mentioned about a 24-hour operation. Yeah, we do have staff there, but we're not going to be having any loud barbecue parties at 11 p.m. Our people are ready for lights out about 7:30. So, yeah, it's not a bad thing. The house behind me, the lady that owns that, I contacted her, and she is not opposed. She has plans to eventually build her retirement home on that property. So there's an acre and a half between this property and Cottage Creek. And we do not have plans to expand once we develop and establish our landscaping and the thing we just like to operate. To be honest with you, right now at Canton Hollow Road, we're full. There is a demand, and we are having people from Farragut tour our facility. We can't offer them services, and they're going elsewhere.
House on that property, part of the property you want?
No. Susan Reeves bought that from the Herons a few years ago.
And nobody lives in it currently?
Her son and some UT students that are going to UT live there. So yeah, yeah. Somebody had mentioned about the safety of the traffic and the additional traffic. We would resolve that issue. I think somebody had mentioned at one of the meetings that it would be dangerous for the children. Well, if we build a senior facility there won't be any additional children that have to be exposed to that traffic on Heron Road or Campbell Station Road.
It would be interesting to look at the daily traffic count generated compared to a traditional, out of just sheer curiosity.
Well, I think I sent Mark some of the research that actually the Heron, the sellers did and sent to me. And traditionally, it's equal to or less than residential. Like this gentleman said, if you have 12 homes there and they generate so many trips a day, the assisted living has been fairly close to that.
By the time you take in deliveries and employees?
Yes. Well, as far as the commercial, we get a food delivery truck twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, and it's those short 28-foot Reinhardt food trucks, so they can back up in the city. And then our trash is emptied twice a week. And it's not the big dumpster that has the arms. It's the Tennessee trash, and they've got the little compactor trucks that back up, and they use a winch to hoist it up, and it slides in, and they let it back down. Because we don't want that noise for our residents either. So the same thing, you have concerns for your neighborhood, we have concerns for our resident. Mrs. Reeves did mention lighting. The lighting on the building being single story, we put it under the eaves and it shines down on the sidewalks and the parking lots, and then the one on the parking lot shines towards the building. So it would not be directed towards other properties. And us being a 50-foot buffer all the way around plus the acre and a half, and then the back towards Woodland Trace, has the creek. And I think Mark is going to ask us to possibly extend that greenway walkway down to Campbell Station Road and complete that section of the greenway. I was a little bit concerned, Mark, that's not going to cross that creek, is it? Because this other gentleman brought up crossing a creek with his path, and I don't.
On the north side
you should be on the north side of it.
Okay, yeah, that would make me feel a lot better. Yeah. Like I said, I have a lot of flexibility in the design. That's why I haven't done a site plan yet. I want to see if it's going to be received. And we want to be part of the community, want to provide that service. I had a facility in Fountain City, and those people, they don't want to leave Fountain City. I mean, that's where they're from. They grew up. Their church is there. Their families are there. Their friends are there. They don't want to leave. And we feel the same way about Farragut. And we know that there's a need here. We do take the state choices program. No other facility in Farragut does that, so our rates are the most competitive in the area.
I'd like to hear from some more residents.
My name is Jody Zahn. I'm at 11510 Cottage Creek Lane, and I think I bought your house, Noah. It's good to meet you in person.
Sounds familiar.
That's right. Mayor Miguel, we have not been here as long as you have. My husband, Jim, and I moved here about 4 years ago from Chicago. And one of the things that drew us to this area was that entrance as we came down Campbell Station into Farragut. And the beauty of that, the park, the residential, the entryway into the city was just amazing. And I feel like bringing this in is going to ruin the integrity of that. I have other concerns as a resident, obviously having this assisted living so close to us. But one of the bigger concerns that I have is, I guess with Mr. Falk himself, because he says he was unable to reach any residents in Cottage Creek. I don't think he tried. He didn't knock on any doors, though he says he did. We came to a meeting with him where he wanted to talk about the concerns and clearly said, if anyone is opposed, I'm not interested in moving forward. We have clearly stated multiple times that we are opposed to this coming in. And most recently at a meeting, he said that he had support from our neighborhood, which he absolutely does not. There's not a single member in our neighborhood that would be in favor of this assisted living coming in. So I'm not sure if anybody else wants to speak, Gary. You have your baby young, but I think I speak for the neighborhood when I say we are adamantly opposed. Bill said it as well. There's not much more to say.
Can I ask a question? Is there anything that you would not be opposed to going in that space? Or do you just want to, like everybody else, see the wild turkeys and the chickens or whatever?
I'm not opposed. I think it needs to remain residential.
Okay.
What I don't want is for it to turn to something other than residential or into any kind of commercial property. And one of the other things that Mr. Falk brought up at one of his sessions was that he was very interested in having an easement on that farmhouse property to extend his driveway up, which if he did that, that would put that entryway to that assisted living right behind Gary Mahoney's house and Stacy Patterson's house. And as residents in that neighborhood and the values of our homes, nobody wants that traffic coming in right behind their house. I mean, that's a serious concern. We all have children, Did you want to talk again?
Also, I think another consideration is who's going to live in this home. The people who are living in the assisted living center. Now, only 2 out of 40 drive. I have had both of my parents in assisted living and then transferred to nursing homes. And while in assisted living, they drove. Now, if they don't drive, they certainly walk. And do we want those people crossing Campbell Station Road to get to the library, to get to the park? I am not opposed to assisted living. Every day that passes, I am closer to going there myself. But I just don't think this is the right place for it. Thank you.
Young Bradley, I have now become old Bradley because I've been waiting so long. Cottage Creek. It's kind of surprising to me to hear Jody talk about coming in, and sir, you're talking about living here. Because I remember when I came here for a job interview, it was a weekend day. It was in May, and the business manager turned into Campbell Station Road, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is the place I want to raise my kids. Elementary school, library, park, homes. I mean, it seemed just glorious. That's why I bought a home there. If there was a assisted living facility, I'm certain that I would not have chosen that place to buy a house. That little portion really is a glorious little place. You take people there, and it's amazing. You get the feel of Farragut as a great place for family, to raise family. And we're driving down there, the businessman is talking about, manager's talking about how this whole place is about family. It's about trying to raise your family in a great place. And I bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and bought a home. But I do know that I would not have purchased a home if there was an assisted living place there. So do I want it? No. And I don't think it's the right place for it. I would welcome other families there, but not a commercialized situation. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to respond to a couple of those comments. The one about the driveway, I don't think Ms. Reeves is interested in selling any of her property. So the driveway would have to be up in that upper corner onto Heron Road to facilitate that. And again, I'd be willing to design the facility and the size and the orientation and the appearance, you know, that would best fit on that site. Being only 2 acres out of the 4.5, I'm not sure you would understand. The residential would be a lot more involved than that. I don't think the residential requires those kind of buffers and setbacks and things like that.
My name is Bill Harden. I live at 613 Glen Willow. I live in the Sweetbriar subdivision, and coming down Heron Road, trying to get out. Of course, we've asked them to extend the light time, because if you're trying to turn left onto Campbell Station, you got to start at the hill and just really be lucky to think, gosh, you got a gun to make it, you know, to make the light right there. And I don't know how many of the people will be driving and how many will be walking. It's already congested there trying to, like I said, we've tried to get the light extended, and they told us, you know, we can't extend the light. So trying to turn left there, it's already a tough spot. And if you try to put someone or try to get whoever's driving from that facility onto Heron Road to get there, that's going to be awful. And then if you try to put someone trying to get out onto Campbell Station, where we talked about earlier tonight, you're going to have to put 2 lights. One for the intersection and one to let the people out there to go left or right. With the school down the street, it's already a fiasco. In the afternoon, pretty much any time right there. Across from the park, no telling how many times people can't even walk across the street that you don't know who's going to do what at the light right there. I mean, there's a light right there, and people don't know when to turn left, do right, when to turn on their blinkers. There's so many wrecks almost right there in that intersection. And then this is going to add to the situation. I don't think it's a good idea. There's a lot of facilities and other places to put this, but that's not the place.
My name is Carol Christofferson. I grew up in Maryville, went to Maryville High School, went to Maryville College, and moved away, and have come back 44 years later. And I remember Farragut as the farms, and it has changed amazingly. Not all for the good, but some parts. And I am really concerned about that whole corridor, not just the one corner of Heron and Campbell Station, but also up at Kingston Pike, and then also the property that is directly across the street on Heron Road, which is privately owned, excuse me, and the pressure to make all of that area commercial is going to get more and more intense as time goes by. The people who own those properties will eventually want to sell, and it will go to the highest bidder. To me, I have looked seriously, and after having lived in New Jersey for a great number of years, an assisted living facility that if Mr. Falk, who I have no reason to think would tell us anything but the absolute truth, would be a fine piece of property to be there. I would love to see it stay empty. I am a total environmental liberal, and I believe that the more land that stays pristine, the better we are. But that's not going to happen. Just like what happened at Turkey Creek when we got run over by the developer moving the buffer zone to get the area rezoned from office to commercial. That was a travesty. But I would really hate to see what else would go in that property if we turn down this assisted living facility.
As far as conservation, this would be the first facility we would try to get LEEDs certified. There's getting to be more and more opportunity for LED lighting, heavier insulation with the spray foam and the bat insulation. So we would try to pursue that here as well. And then on one last comment is that we would provide about 30 jobs to people in Farragut. And of course, we do pay property taxes. Thank you very much.
If I can just say one final thing, I think I've heard from a number of people, oh, we're afraid, we want to put this in because we're afraid of what else might come in, what other commercial thing. I think you have the power to keep this residential. And that's what we're asking you to do, is keep this a residential area, coming into Farragut, coming down Campbell Station. We're happy to have residents behind us. That's why we're there, to live among families and to raise our families that way. So, you know, I don't want anybody to make a decision based on, oh, well, we'd rather have this than a Jiffy Lube or a Weigel's. You know, we have the power to keep it residential, and we would ask you to do that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
The one issue when I look at this is if it stays residential, which I don't disagree with all the comments on either side of this, with it where it is, if you keep it R2, I'm not sure how many houses potentially could go on that property. What are you thinking, Mark? With R2?
Probably 4 or 5, 6, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's
R2,
you have to factor in the
15,000 square foot
road.
lots. I mean, it's-
Yeah,
It could be
I mean, I would think you get it to 10 or 12.
12.
that many.
That kind of traffic
One second.
that would be created by 10 to 12 houses, I mean, that's a real issue if you keep it that way, how they're going to get out on that, no matter what you put there. It's a hard place to get in and out of. But when you've got a small neighborhood of 10 to 12, you guys are a little bit bigger than that. That's adding a lot more heartache to all of you. And I guess that's the part I'm struggling with. I get what the point you're trying to make, but the reality is you leave it R2, eventually it will develop, and it'll be 10 to 12 houses, and it's going to be a headache.
Well, and I
So-
think there's still some inconsistencies, because I think I just heard Peter say they would provide 30 jobs, but I don't know how many people that is coming in and out every single day. I know he's saying, oh, maybe 8 to 10 cars, but honestly, you know, yeah, I mean, there would be traffic with a residential neighborhood, but it's the fundamental piece of it being a place to raise your children. To Young's point, you come in and, you know, you're this family and you want to raise your children and walk them to school and take them over to the park. And the assisted living just does not fit with that way of living. So I personally would rather have the traffic with the residential neighborhood and have those, you know, have that be part of the community versus the assisted living. That's just my own personal preference.
I think what I'm struggling with is number one, I'm a big advocate of different choices of housing in the town of Farragut. However, this particular stretch of Campbell Station Road is a gateway to the town, which myself included and a lot of you have commented on how pretty it is. And it does have a special beauty that when I have folks that are coming into the town of Farragut, well, I'm going to tell them to come in Campbell Station instead of come in Lovell Road or Watt Road or Kingston Pike. And because I'm proud of that. And I think that as much as I would like to advocate for senior living and assisted living in the town, I think this particular site, it just has an appearance, even though to me it's more residential than commercial, but I think it has an appearance of a more commercial nature, and I think that's going against kind of what my thought is, and I think of what kind of we've kind of envisioned Campbell Station, at least from Grigsby Chapel all the way up to where Jamestown Boulevard comes out, and that was this very residential in nature area, and so like I said, I'm struggling with this, but I kind of tend to think that it would pain me if the Cokers, who own quite a bit of property on Campbell Station Road on the other side of Heron, which I've known some of the Cokers for years. And it would pain me to say, well, gosh, they're commercial, we would like commercial too. And even if it is R6 residential, it somewhat has an appearance of commercial. And so I think with that being said, I think I would really struggle with trying to approve your use in that particular location. As much as I would like to have an opportunity for folks that are aging out of their particular house to be able to stay close to home, or have my in-laws. Of course, I'm not sure necessarily I want them that much closer to me, but anyway, it is. But at that particular location, I struggle with, due to the fact that if somebody else came up, or that the church down the road said, hey, we've got somebody that wants to come along and they want to build an office building and they're giving us lots of money and we can do all these great things with the money by selling our church, and I just get worried that that's the one little hole in the dam that is going to take something that we have real special in the town of Farragut. As much as I have respect for and I'm very familiar with your project on Canton Hollow, I followed it for a couple of years, and I think you're a very honorable person. I think this particular location is real challenging to me, just for the aesthetics of our primary gateway. This town was founded 35 years ago based on the premises that we don't want to be Knox County. And Knox County shoved a lot of things down our throats over a lot of years until 1980. In 1980, we said, we're not doing it that way anymore. And this is something, to me, that this is sacred in the town of Farragut. It's just this one stretch that's about a mile long that has a real pretty beauty. And as much as it pains me to tell the Heron family, well, I'm sorry, we're telling you no again on another proposed use. And I know they've heard a lot of no's over the years on this particular site. Matter of fact, I've called, I can't remember which Heron, many years ago, inquiring about some ideas that I had. But I knew at the end of the day it was absolutely traditional single-family residential in nature that I was going to get stuck with. And what these folks have expressed, that even if it generates more traffic and generates more kids in the schools, their thoughts are to stay consistent with their neighborhoods, which are single-family residential neighborhoods. Anyway, I'm typically long-winded anyway. I'll shut up. But I'm sorry. Like I said, I like your project, but I can't see it right there.
Well, I guess I'm disappointed to hear that, because I would really be excited about having a really nice quality project and working with you guys on that. They do call them home for seniors for a reason, that they are their home. So it does look like a home. And you would be surprised at how much senior living is a convenience item. We've had facilities that were full, and we referred them to another one of our own facilities, and they don't want to drive the 5 miles that they're apart.
I'm sure they want their kids and their friends to stay close to them.
Mom and Dad want to stop by and see Mom and Dad on the way home from work, or make it convenient. So it's like a Walgreens. It's kind of like you go to the closest one that's to you. And as far as safety, the residential does have the potential for young drivers that might not be as safe. So.
Well, if there's any way we can encourage you to continue your search, I think we would all very much welcome your product in Farragut.
Well, that, to me, I'm a visionary, I guess. Like I said, I've found eight locations and developed 8 properties, and to me that site is just ideal. I mean, a single story, 612 pitch roof with dormers and blended colors and nice natural stone and landscaping with a green screen, and I just don't see how you're going to get a residential development in there that's going to look better and be lower impact than this project, especially with my willingness to be as flexible as I can be.
I think from the outside looking in, I completely agree with you if you're stepping on the outside. But if you've been here and you've really been able to understand of how much, even the Board of Mayor and Aldermen has gone to the length of actually writing it down in a formal ordinance of, hey, this is a section of road that is somewhat sacred to us. And it is. And it's because it's the only one that we really have that we can, as far as a gateway goes, that we can be really proud of.
All the more reason to take advantage of this opportunity to get that type of project established in there, and that was Mrs. Reeves' point as well, that she would like to know that it was established before she invests in her retirement home in between me and Cottage Creek.
I can't get to the mic because I have a baby that's asleep from this long meeting, but I would really encourage you all as our planning commission to really look at that corridor and include that in your master plan and hold that sacred for the town of Farragut. I think Level Road is a good reminder of what can happen, and it's really in your hands around that welcome to Farragut and what that looks like. So
We've actually done that. It is codified, if that's the correct word, Mr. Mayor, but we have gone to that, or the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have actually done that, and that's what makes this challenging tonight. If it was another gateway, just not that gateway to the town, I think it's a great. We use R6 as a transitional zoning, from heavier, more dense zoning, commercial or office zoning, to residential. Everything else remaining ceteris paribus, it would be great, except it's that particular gateway that is sacred to us.
And I think there are so many great spots in Farragut that could really use that. I really do. And I'm all for it. I used to work at one of those in high school. And this community could really use that. And there is just so much commercial space that really, there's some right up the road that, could really benefit from something like this. And I think it would be aesthetically very beautiful in the right location.
I agree. I know there's challenges trying to find a piece of property that not only fits the requirements, but financially has to fit his business plan, and you can't necessarily go pay big bucks per acre on Kingston Pike and try to make this facility work and still make it affordable to his residents. So it's a balancing act. I understand that.
Well, plus we like to be in the nice part as well, because our residents call that their home.
Okay.
I guess for the record, I
think we've probably had all the discussion we can absorb on that subject, so we'll have to take it under advisement, I guess. And again, the only thing that comes to mind is that if we got more Clayton-built homes in that piece of property, I'd be unhappy.
You all in a position comfortable enough to give the applicant a sense of your feeling toward this? Or?
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say, if it's all right, Ed. I'm speaking just from
you.
Most importantly, for everyone, I'm speaking on my behalf, not on the behalf of the rest of the commission. So, and there are commissioners that are not here tonight as well.
Anybody else have it's whatever you're comfortable with, but it would be helpful to give him some direction, I think, one way or the other.
Well,
if you're at that point in your decision making.
I think if the direction is it's unlikely to happen.
Maybe he could put us in where the Farragut Center is and move Farragut Center to somewhere a little bit bigger.
What are you talking about, the 5-story building?
Yeah. 6-story building, because I would put extra parking in there.
It's zoned R2 now.
Yes.
Which is consistent with all Sweetbriar and Cottage Creek.
But it's inconsistent with everything else in that corridor.
Unless you want to be zoned open space park.
Is there enough room?
Well, OSP, I'm being facetious, I apologize. You don't want to be an open space park. I'm sure the Herons don't want to be an open space park either.
Well, I think I can speak for all of us in saying that we'll certainly welcome you into the town of Farragut if you can find a suitable place that's not on Campbell Station Road. I hate to have to put it that way, but I think over the years that has become pretty sacred, and I'd like to leave it that way. But you're certainly welcome in Farragut anytime.
Turn Ed, or
let's
maybe utility? Do we have utility stuff?
No, we don't have any utilities.
I guess we have to have a motion to adjourn here. I'm just used to adjourning.
Get that? My kids will third it.
Are they here?
No.
Meeting's adjourned.
They're waiting up for me.
Yeah.